In the early years of the American colonies, during a time of growing unrest, one figure quietly emerged whose name would forever be tied to the revolution that would shape the future of a nation. Paul Revere, born in 1735 in Boston, was not a politician nor a soldier of grand fame, but rather a skilled silversmith whose life was quietly intertwined with the history of his time. His journey, like so many during this pivotal period, was shaped by the pressures of colonial resistance and the slow, steady rise of a desire for independence. As a young man, Revere worked in the shadows of revolution, crafting fine silver works while the political climate in Boston grew more tense. His role was often unassuming but essential, whether through his intelligence work or his deep commitment to the cause of liberty. Of course, his name became famous for a single fateful moment, the midnight ride that warned of the British approach, but his life, lived in the rhythm of a quieter revolution, was much more than that. As you settle into the steady cadence of this story, let Paul Revere's journey unfold, quietly and calmly, from his earliest days to his final years. Let his life, a steady pulse in the making of a nation, guide you into peaceful rest. If you enjoy this gentle telling, feel free to like, subscribe, and share where you're listening from. But for now, allow yourself to drift as we begin the story of Paul Revere. Paul Revere was born on January 1st, 1735 in the city of Boston, a place filled with both the bustle of early American colonial life and the quiet rumblings of growing discontent. The second son of a French Huguenot named Apollos Revere and his wife, Deborah Hickborn, Paul would eventually inherit a life rooted in trade, but it was one defined by more than simply a silversmith's apprenticeship. Boston, in the mid-18th century, was a city of vibrancy and tension, a place where ideas of freedom were beginning to take root, and where men like Paul Revere would one day make their mark, quietly, though decisively. His father, Apollos, had immigrated to America from France, fleeing religious persecution. In an era when Boston's population was a mix of English settlers, Dutch traders, and a variety of other immigrant groups, the Huguenot community found a degree of acceptance in a city that valued hard work and craftsmanship. However, life was not always kind to the Revere family. Apollos's health began to deteriorate, and by the time Paul was a young child, his father passed away, leaving the family in a vulnerable position. With his father's death, young Paul inherited the responsibility of supporting his mother and siblings. His mother, Deborah, was left to manage the household, while Paul took on the task of learning the trade that had been his father's, silversmithing. At the age of 13, Paul began his apprenticeship under a master silversmith, John Coney, which would mark the beginning of his lifelong connection to the craft. This period of Paul Revere's life, while quiet and seemingly unremarkable, set the stage for everything that followed. In those early years, Revere learned the skills that would shape his future. But more importantly, it was in these formative years that Paul's sense of duty and purpose began to take shape. There was a certain steadiness in his work, an attention to detail and a deep respect for the craft, that would later be reflected in his more public acts of service during the Revolution. The Boston Revere family lived in a modest home in the city's North End, where Paul would spend his days working in the silversmithing shop, honing his skills. By all accounts, the young Paul was a quiet, diligent boy whose focus on his craft would be the defining feature of his early years. In a city as politically active as Boston, however, it would be impossible for any young man, especially one as perceptive as Paul, to remain uninvolved in the growing political tensions of the time. Though he was not yet fully aware of the ways his life would intersect with history, the seeds of Revere's future role were planted in these early days. In a city like Boston, where the streets were alive with talk of liberty and resistance, it was inevitable that Paul Revere, like so many others, would eventually find himself called to something larger than his trade. As Paul worked under his master, he would witness firsthand the rising tensions between the colonies and Britain. By the 1740s, the whispers of rebellion were growing louder in the streets of Boston, fueled by acts such as the Stamp Act and the heavy taxation imposed by the British government. For many in Boston, the silversmiths and artisans were often seen as quiet revolutionaries, working in their shops while also subtly resisting British policies. Revere would later find his way into these circles of resistance, but for now these early years in Boston were shaped by the work at hand, silversmithing, family life, and the slow, steady pulse of the city. There was little fanfare, and yet Paul Revere's life was already quietly aligning itself with the larger forces of change that would soon sweep through the American colonies. As his apprenticeship drew to a close, Paul began to develop a reputation as a skilled craftsman. At the age of 19, he became a full-fledged silversmith, opening his own shop in Boston. His pieces were highly regarded for their intricate designs and fine quality. But even as his work gained recognition, the undercurrent of political unrest began to pull him into its orbit. This segment of Paul Revere's life, though quiet in many ways, laid the groundwork for the man he would become. His skills as a silversmith would not only serve him in his personal life, but they would eventually help him contribute to the cause of independence. In this period, as he worked diligently and quietly in his shop, Revere was unknowingly preparing himself for a much larger role in the history of America. By the mid-1740s, Paul Revere's life had begun to settle into a quiet rhythm. However, the family struggles that marked his early years would continue to shape his path. His father's untimely death left a void in his life, and the young boy had been thrust into the position of helping to care for his mother and siblings. As Paul matured, he became more responsible for supporting the family, though this burden was not always easy to bear. In the aftermath of his father's passing, Deborah Hitchborn Revere, Paul's mother, took on the role of matriarch, keeping the family together in a difficult time. She managed the household with a quiet strength, as the family navigated the financial struggles that came with the loss of a key provider. Paul, now in his teenage years, carried the weight of his father's legacy in his role as young man of the house. His work as an apprentice silversmith was his contribution, but the uncertainty of his future often lingered. During these formative years, Revere's relationship with his family deepened. He had several siblings, and together they formed a tightly knit group, each contributing to the household in their own way. Although life in the Revere household was marked by hardship, there was an underlying sense of unity. Paul's bond with his mother and his siblings became one of mutual support. While his mother managed the household, Paul took on the responsibility of his apprenticeship, learning the intricate techniques of silversmithing and proving himself as a dedicated craftsman. Despite the hardships, this period of Paul's life helped to shape his character. He began to show a strong work ethic, and his understanding of responsibility grew. His success in silversmithing began to offer him some independence, allowing him to eventually open his own shop. But the greatest change in Paul's life during this time came with his eventual marriage. At the age of 20, in 1757, Paul Revere married Sarah Orne, the daughter of a respected Boston merchant. Sarah came from a well-established family, and their union reflected both love and the practical necessity of forming alliances during a time of uncertainty. The marriage was a significant step for Revere, providing him with the opportunity to establish a household of his own. The couple went on to have several children, and Paul's role as a father began to take shape in these early years. With his family growing, Revere became increasingly aware of the world outside his workshop. His responsibilities shifted as he moved from a young apprentice into the role of a family man, whose livelihood depended not only on his craft but also on his ability to navigate the world of politics and trade. In this quiet period of growth, Paul Revere would begin to realize the importance of his work, not just as a silversmith, but as someone who would one day play a larger part in the unfolding drama of colonial resistance. During these years, the political climate in Boston began to change. Tensions between the American colonies and Britain grew as Parliament imposed more taxes and restrictions on the colonies. The public outcry against British policies reached a boiling point, and this unrest would begin to draw Revere into the political arena. Though still primarily focused on his silversmithing business and family life, Paul found himself increasingly engaged with the growing colonial resistance. Through the network of his fellow artisans who shared a similar sense of frustration with British rule, Revere began to align himself with the emerging ideas of liberty and independence. This quiet engagement with the resistance, while not yet a full commitment to rebellion, began to shape his thoughts and actions. As the 1750s drew to a close, Paul Revere's life was slowly but steadily changing. His business was thriving, his family was growing, and his role in Boston society was becoming more established. Yet in the background, the stirrings of revolution were already beginning to take hold. Revere's story, while still grounded in the steady work of a silversmith, was quietly entwining itself with the larger events that would define a new nation. By the end of this period, in 1759, Revere's world was still largely focused on his family, his business, and his craft. Yet, with the political climate growing more charged, Paul Revere's role as a quiet observer would soon turn into that of an active participant. The small, steady steps of his life would soon lead him to a place where he would have to choose whether to continue his life as a craftsman or to stand up for something much larger than himself. Though the echoes of revolution were still distant in these years, Paul Revere was already, in his quiet way, preparing for the future. By the time Paul Revere entered his 20s, he had already assumed the weight of responsibility for his family. His early apprenticeship in silversmithing had been a quiet yet essential part of his life, laying the foundation for what would become a successful career. The steady, meticulous nature of the craft, each piece formed with care and patience, mirrored the slow, deliberate rhythm of his own life during this time. As Revere approached adulthood, he was becoming well known in Boston for his skill and precision in the silversmith trade. Revere's apprenticeship had begun when he was just 13 years old, and it had shaped him into a disciplined craftsman. Working under the guidance of John Coney, a respected silversmith in Boston, Revere learned the intricacies of his craft. He spent years mastering the art of silversmithing, perfecting delicate designs for everything from spoons and bowls to candlesticks and teapots. The precision and attention to detail required in this craft would serve him well, as his reputation grew over time. In 1755, after completing his apprenticeship, Revere set up his own silversmithing shop in Boston. At the age of 20, he was now fully independent, running his own business in a city that was filled with opportunity, but also marked by growing political unrest. His workshop, situated in the heart of Boston, became known for producing some of the finest silverware in the region. He worked with a steady hand, focusing on the creation of elegant pieces that were prized by the wealthier residents of the city. His skill as a craftsman earned him a reputation that spread beyond Boston, and he soon became known as one of the finest silversmiths in the colonies. But while his shop flourished, the city around him began to change. Tensions between the American colonies and the British government were escalating, with laws like the Stamp Act, 1765, and the Townshend Acts, 1767, stirring the public into action. The colonies, and especially Boston, were beginning to feel the weight of British control. Revere, though primarily concerned with his business, was not immune to the growing dissatisfaction that ran through the streets of his city. Boston, in the years leading up to the Revolution, was a city of strong convictions and heated debates. It was a place where ideas of freedom, independence, and self-governance were beginning to take hold, and Revere, though focused on his craft, found himself increasingly drawn to the ideas of resistance. He was well connected to the merchant and artisan class, many of whom were sympathetic to the cause of independence. Through these connections, Revere began to learn of the political unrest that simmered beneath the surface of Boston's bustling economy. In addition to his work as a silversmith, Revere also began to take on more roles in the city's public life. He became an active participant in the growing resistance movement, joining groups like the Sons of Liberty, a secret society that opposed British taxation. These men, many of whom were artisans, merchants, and tradesmen, were the backbone of Boston's protest efforts. They organised protests, distributed pamphlets, and spread the word about the injustices being imposed on the colonies. While Revere's participation in these groups was still somewhat indirect during these early years, he was becoming more involved. He began engraving political cartoons and prints, one of which was a famous image of the Boston Massacre that helped inflame anti-British sentiment. His skill with engraving, honed during his years as a silversmith, gave him a unique role in the resistance. Revere's engravings would eventually be seen as a crucial form of propaganda, helping to rally the people of Boston against British rule. These images would spread across the colonies, fueling the growing movement for independence. Yet, despite his increasing involvement in the revolutionary cause, Revere remained primarily a craftsman. His focus remained on his silversmithing business, which continued to thrive. In 1758, Revere married Sarah Orne, the daughter of a prominent Boston merchant, further cementing his place in Boston's upper artisan class. The couple would go on to have several children together. As a father, Revere took great pride in providing for his family, ensuring they lived comfortably, despite the challenges that came with the political climate. During these years, Revere's life, though marked by steady work and family life, was becoming increasingly entwined with the winds of change sweeping through the colonies. The Boston Massacre in 1770 would be the first direct confrontation that would draw Revere into the revolution in earnest, but the seeds of rebellion were already sown during these early years. Revere's dedication to his craft, his family, and his community would ultimately position him as a key figure in the years leading up to the Revolution. By the end of the 1750s, Revere was a well-respected silversmith and an active, though quiet, member of Boston's political scene. His skill as a craftsman had earned him a comfortable life, and his growing involvement in the resistance reflected the political climate of the time. As he worked in his shop, crafting silver pieces for wealthy patrons, he could hear the rising tides of unrest, and though his work had always been slow and meticulous, his attention would soon turn to a much larger cause. The next decade would see Paul Revere move from the quiet life of a craftsman to the role of a revolutionary hero. But for now, in these years of steady work and family life, Paul Revere was quietly preparing for the future. By the early 1760s, the political climate in Boston had shifted dramatically. Revere, still in his early 30s, was watching as his world, once focused primarily on his silversmithing business, began to feel the tremors of growing unrest. The streets of Boston, once quiet with the hum of daily trade and craftsmanship, were now filled with the rumblings of discontent, taxes, policies, and the looming presence of British soldiers began to change the rhythm of life in the city, and Revere, like many of his fellow colonists, could not remain aloof from the mounting tensions. The British Parliament's decision to impose new taxes on the colonies, most notably the Sugar Act 1764 and the Stamp Act 1765, had a profound impact on the lives of the people in Boston. The Stamp Act, which required colonists to purchase a special stamp for printed materials, was especially burdensome to the merchants, printers, and artisans who made up a significant portion of the city's population. Revere, as a silversmith and businessman, was directly affected by the Stamp Act, as it taxed many of the materials used in his trade, such as paper and documents related to transactions. The imposition of these taxes and the general feeling of being oppressed by a distant and unaccountable government sparked a wave of anger throughout the colonies. For Paul Revere, this was a turning point. His life as a craftsman and a family man would no longer be separated from the larger political battles that were unfolding around him. As a respected member of the community, he became increasingly involved in the resistance movement. Though his primary focus had been on his silversmithing work and raising his growing family, Revere began to lend his skills to the cause of liberty. He became an active member of the Sons of Liberty, a group of colonial men who organised protests against British policies. The group's goal was to resist British oppression by any means necessary, and their activities became increasingly bold and public. Revere's role within the Sons of Liberty was not one of overt leadership, but he played a crucial part in organising and spreading information. He helped to plan protests, rally the people, and even engage in acts of civil disobedience, One of the group's most famous acts of resistance came in 1765, when a mob of colonists, including members of the Sons of Liberty, tore down the statue of King George III in Boston in protest of the Stamp Act. This event marked a significant moment in the history of colonial resistance, and Revere, though not one of the direct instigators, was undoubtedly aware of the growing fervour in the city. It was also during this time that Revere's engravings began to gain wider attention. As a skilled artist, he created powerful images that communicated the injustice of British rule. His engravings were not just works of art, they were political tools designed to inflame public sentiment and rally support for the cause of independence. One of his most famous engravings was of the Boston Massacre, an event that took place in 1770, but had its roots in the growing tension of the years leading up to it. In the engraving, Revere depicted the British soldiers as aggressors, firing into a crowd of unarmed colonists. This image would become one of the most iconic representations of British tyranny in the colonies, further cementing Revere's place in the emerging revolutionary movement. Yet, despite his increasing involvement in the cause of resistance, Revere's life remained marked by the quiet steadiness of his trade. As he worked in his silversmithing shop, creating intricate pieces of jewellery, household items and tableware, he also quietly became a part of something much larger than himself. The contrast between his craft and the revolutionary movement was striking. While his shop was a place of quiet concentration and careful handiwork, the political activity in Boston was loud, contentious, and filled with passion. Revere's growing involvement in the political scene was a natural extension of his deep sense of justice. He had witnessed firsthand the struggles of the colonists against British rule and understood the need for action. However, even as the pressure mounted, Revere did not let his political engagement interfere with his craft. His reputation as a silversmith continued to grow, and his work, prized by the wealthy of Boston, provided him with both status and stability. This period of Revere's life was marked by a gradual shift from the individual world of a craftsman to a more public and politically engaged existence. Yet, even as he moved into the realm of public activism, he maintained the steady discipline of his silversmithing. His work as a craftsman allowed him to contribute to the colony's resistance efforts in a way that few others could, with his skill in engraving providing a unique and valuable tool for spreading revolutionary ideas. As the decade drew to a close, Revere found himself increasingly involved in the larger currents of colonial resistance. The Stamp Act was repealed in 1766, but the sense of injustice that had been kindled in Boston did not die down. In fact, it would only intensify as further acts of British control were imposed. The Townshend Acts, the Quartering Act, and the presence of British troops in Boston all contributed to the growing resentment against British rule. Revere, like so many others, could see that the road to independence was becoming more inevitable with each passing year. By 1765, Paul Revere had fully embraced his role in the struggle for independence, though his actions were often quiet and measured. His engravings, his participation in the Sons of Liberty, and his role in the political landscape of Boston were all contributions that added to the momentum of the resistance. Revere was no longer simply a silversmith. He was a craftsman of revolution, carefully shaping the future of America with every political act, every engraving, and every quiet protest. By the time the mid-1760s arrived, Paul Revere's life had taken on a steadier, more established rhythm. As his political involvement deepened and his silversmithing business flourished, he also found stability in his personal life with his marriage to Sarah Orne in 1757. Sarah came from a well-established Boston family, and their union not only provided Revere with emotional support but also further solidified his place within the social fabric of the city. Together they would build a family, and their home would become a steady anchor amidst the growing unrest in Boston. Revere and Sarah had several children together, and as the family grew, so did Paul's sense of responsibility. While his silversmithing business and increasing political activism took up much of his time, the well-being of his family remained central to his life. The balance between family life and his growing involvement in the resistance movement was delicate. He was, by all accounts, a loving and devoted father. His commitment to his family was evident in his constant drive to provide for them, even as the pressures of political and economic change began to mount. Throughout these years, Revere's work as a silversmith continued to prosper. He had earned a reputation for fine craftsmanship, and his pieces were in high demand among the wealthier citizens of Boston. In his shop, he crafted everything from elegant silver spoons to intricate teapots and serving trays. But as the political climate in Boston grew increasingly volatile, Paul found that his role in the revolution was becoming more than just a bystander's. He was now a quiet but determined participant in the effort for American independence, and his family life and his work began to reflect the tension between the calm of domesticity and the turmoil of revolution. In the years following their marriage, Sarah and Paul had a growing family to care for. The pressures of raising children and managing the household were ever present. Revere, as a father, was deeply involved in the upbringing of his children, teaching them the values of hard work and responsibility that had guided his own life. His family, as with many others in the colonies, was touched by the looming uncertainty of the times. As tensions between the colonies and Britain continued to escalate, Paul's children, like the rest of Boston's young citizens, would come to witness firsthand the sacrifices that their father was making in the name of liberty. Despite his growing political involvement, Revere did not neglect his role as a provider and father. His shop remained a bustling centre of activity, where he continued to craft beautiful silver works, some of which would be passed down as family heirlooms, and others that would contribute to the growing wealth of Boston's elite. Revere's work as a craftsman provided a stable foundation for his family, and his children would come to see the quiet pride he took in his trade. At the same time, Revere's political activism began to shift from passive support to active engagement. His work with the Sons of Liberty became more frequent and more public. He participated in protests and helped to distribute information about British injustices. As one of the leading figures in the organisation, Revere's involvement in resistance activities was growing more intense. He began to witness firsthand the challenges of living in a city where British soldiers patrolled the streets, and colonists were becoming increasingly emboldened in their opposition to British rule. In 1770, the political situation in Boston would take a tragic turn. The Boston Massacre, as it came to be known, would forever alter the course of the American Revolution. British soldiers stationed in Boston fired into a crowd of colonists who were protesting British oppression, killing 5 men. The event sparked outrage throughout the city, and in many ways was the catalyst for the coming revolution. Though Revere did not play an overt role in the Boston Massacre itself, he responded quickly to the tragedy. As a skilled engraver, he took it upon himself to create an engraving of the event that would be widely distributed. In the engraving, he depicted the British soldiers firing into a defenceless crowd, painting them as the aggressors and framing the event as an example of British tyranny. Revere's engraving would become one of the most iconic images of the revolution and would further cement his place in the growing resistance movement. His artistic skill and political engagement were intertwined in a way that made his contributions to the cause of independence unique. The massacre was a pivotal moment for Revere. It marked the point at which his work as a craftsman and his role in the political resistance merged completely. His engravings, which had once been used for decorative purposes, now became a tool for spreading revolutionary ideals. The engraving of the Boston Massacre was widely reproduced, and it helped to fuel the fires of rebellion in the hearts and minds of colonists across the American colonies. During these years, Revere's family continued to grow, and with each new child his sense of responsibility deepened. He had begun to see the revolution not only as a political struggle, but also as a personal one that would shape the future of his children and their place in a new, independent nation. Despite the growing threats of violence in the streets of Boston, Revere's devotion to his family and his work remained steadfast. His home was a place of refuge, a sanctuary amidst the turmoil of a city on the brink of revolution. Through it all, Revere remained a steady and reliable presence in his family's life, balancing the demands of fatherhood, business, and political activism. His commitment to his family was unwavering, even as he became increasingly involved in the resistance effort. This period of his life, marked by the quiet joys of family life and the ever-present tension of political unrest, would ultimately set the stage for his role in the American Revolution. As the 1770s progressed, tensions between the American colonies and Great Britain reached a boiling point. The unrest in Boston, the scene of so many revolutionary events, continued to simmer beneath the surface. By 1775, the colonies had reached a critical moment in their fight for independence. The battles of Lexington and Concord were looming, and Paul Revere, who had long been involved in the cause of liberty, would soon become a key figure in one of the most famous events in American history. The story of Revere's midnight ride is widely known, but the significance of the event goes beyond the dramatic escape through the night. On April 18, 1775, Revere's ride became a pivotal moment in the early stages of the American Revolution. His mission was simple but crucial: to warn the colonial militias in Lexington and Concord that British troops were marching toward them, intent on seizing military supplies stored in these towns. Though Revere's ride is often remembered in legend and poem, the events of that night were grounded in a quiet determination, carried out by a man who understood the weight of the task before him. Revere was no stranger to the tensions brewing in Boston. For years he had been a part of the colonial resistance, working with the Sons of Liberty and helping to spread information throughout the city. The British had long been monitoring the activities of the colonists, and Revere knew that the British were planning to take decisive action to quell the growing rebellion. Word had come through the intelligence network that the British were about to make their move, and Revere was called upon to take action. On the evening of April 18th, Revere received a signal that the British were marching toward Lexington and Concord. The alarm had been sounded, and the time had come to warn the colonists of the impending danger. Revere, along with fellow patriot William Dawes, was tasked with riding through the countryside to alert the militias. Their goal was to get to Lexington and Concord before the British troops arrived, to give the militia enough time to prepare and to ensure the safety of the arms stored there. The ride itself was filled with urgency, though there was little fanfare. As Revere rode through the darkened streets of Boston, his thoughts were focused solely on the task ahead. He was familiar with the roads he would travel, having ridden them countless times before, but this night was different. He knew that every moment mattered, and that his warning could change the course of history. Revere's route took him across the Charles River, where he was met by two other patriots, John Hancock and Samuel Adams, who were also in danger of being captured by the British. Revere's warning to them was a critical part of the effort to protect the leaders of the resistance, ensuring that they were safe and could continue organising the colonial militias. After delivering his message, Revere continued on his ride, racing through the night to reach Concord, where he hoped to reach the arms supplies before the British could get there. Though Revere's ride was dramatic, it was not without its difficulties. At one point he was captured by a British patrol, but he managed to escape, continuing his ride despite the close call. The ride, in many ways, was a testament to Revere's courage and his deep commitment to the cause of liberty. He did not hesitate when called upon to serve his country. Instead, he acted with quiet resolve and determination, knowing the importance of his mission. Though Revere is often credited with the entirety of the midnight ride, the truth is that many others played a role in the effort to warn the militias. William Dawes, another rider, took a different route and alerted many of the same towns. The famed 1 if by land, 2 if by sea signal, which Revere used to convey the British movement, was just one part of the intricate communication network that was set in place to alert the colonists. In the end, Revere's ride was successful. By the time the British soldiers arrived in Lexington and Concord, the militias were ready. The battles that followed, the first shots fired between the colonists and the British, were the opening engagements of the American Revolution. Revere's ride, though brief and often understated in historical accounts, had set the stage for these events. His actions helped to ensure that the American patriots were prepared for the conflict that was about to unfold. Revere's midnight ride became one of the most iconic moments of the American Revolution. It symbolized the quiet resolve and courage of the colonists, who were willing to risk everything to secure their freedom. In the years that followed, the story of Revere's ride would be immortalized in poems, songs, and legends. But for Revere, it was simply another moment of quiet action, in a life defined by steady commitment to his cause and his country. Though Revere's role in the revolution would continue to evolve, and though he would face many more challenges in the years to come, the midnight ride remains one of the most defining moments of his life. It marked the beginning of a new chapter for Revere, one in which his actions would help shape the course of history. And as he rode through the darkness that night, Paul Revere's quiet determination was a harbinger of the greater conflict to come, a conflict that would forever alter the course of the American colonies and lead to the birth of a new nation. The events of April 18, 1775 forever solidified Paul Revere's place in American history. His midnight ride, a quiet but pivotal act of courage, set the stage for the battles of Lexington and Concord. Though his role was often overshadowed by the larger events of the day, the aftermath of the ride marked a significant shift in Revere's life. From that moment on, his contributions to the cause of American independence would grow, but so would the risks and challenges he faced. After Revere's ride, the colonists in Lexington and Concord were able to prepare for the British forces, ensuring that the first shots of the American Revolution were fired under more favourable circumstances. The battles themselves were brief but significant, marking the beginning of an open conflict between Britain and the American colonies. Revere's efforts to warn the militias helped to give them the time they needed to gather their forces, and for this he was celebrated in revolutionary circles. However, the success of the warning did not mean that Revere's work was done. In fact, his involvement in the revolution would deepen in the following years. After the events of April 1775, Paul Revere continued to play an active role in the colonial resistance. His experience as a messenger, an engraver, and an organizer made him a key figure in the revolution, and his contributions would continue to shape the early stages of the conflict. Revere's immediate aftermath of the midnight ride saw him briefly detained by the British. Although he was eventually released, the incident underscored the serious dangers that came with his involvement in the revolutionary cause. Revere had been captured by a British patrol during his ride, though he was able to escape, continuing his warning of the British advance. Despite his escape, the encounter was a reminder that he, like many others in the resistance, was always at risk of capture or worse. In the years that followed, Revere's role expanded beyond that of a messenger. He became more deeply involved in the military side of the revolution, contributing to the organization of the Continental Army. Revere played a key role in acquiring and transporting artillery, and he also became involved in the logistics of supplying the revolutionary forces with the necessary materials to fight against the British. His skills as a craftsman, engraver, and organizer were invaluable, and he quickly earned the trust of his fellow patriots. In 1775, Revere was given an official military commission by the Massachusetts Provincial Congress. His mission was to oversee the construction of fortifications and to help organize the defense of Boston. Revere was placed in charge of an artillery unit, and his leadership proved effective as he worked to secure the city and its surrounding areas from British forces. This period marked Revere's first significant military involvement, and though he was not a soldier in the traditional sense, his contributions to the defense of Boston were crucial. Revere's role in the American Revolution also extended to his work as a member of the Massachusetts Committee of Safety, a group tasked with overseeing the defense of the colonies. Through this committee, Revere helped coordinate efforts to mobilize militia forces, organize the transfer of military supplies, and monitor the movements of British troops. His calm, methodical approach to his duties proved to be an asset to the revolutionary cause. Despite his growing military responsibilities, Revere's silversmithing business remained active, and his family continued to be a priority. He remained a steady figure in Boston, working to balance the demands of family life with his increasingly significant role in the revolution. His wife Sarah continued to support him throughout this time, and together they raised their children, who were growing up in a time of extraordinary change. However, as the revolution began to escalate, Revere's attention was increasingly focused on the military and political needs of the colonists. The Siege of Boston, which began in April 1775, kept Revere busy, organising defences and procuring materials for the Continental Army. This period was one of constant vigilance and planning, with the British forces still occupying Boston and threatening the surrounding areas. Revere's skill in managing these logistics, often working quietly behind the scenes, helped ensure that the Continental Army was prepared for the battles to come. In 1776, the Continental Congress declared independence, and the Revolution entered a new phase. With the Declaration of Independence signed, Revere's role shifted again. His work as a military organiser continued, but now he was also engaged in the broader efforts of supporting the newly declared United States. As the revolution unfolded and the stakes grew higher, Revere remained a key figure in the resistance, contributing in ways large and small. Though Revere is most often remembered for his midnight ride, his post-ride contributions to the revolution were just as significant. His involvement in the early stages of the conflict, particularly in the Siege of Boston, ensured that the Continental Army had the necessary resources to fight. His work with the Committee of Safety and his leadership in the organisation of the colonial militias further solidified his place as a key figure in the revolution. Despite his increasingly important role in the military and political activities of the revolutionaries, Revere's life remained grounded in the values he had held since his early days as a silversmith. His commitment to his family, his craft, and his country never wavered, and throughout the years of conflict he remained steady, working tirelessly for the cause of independence. His work may have been quiet at times, but the impact of his efforts rippled through the Revolutionary War, helping to ensure the success of the fledgling nation. The aftermath of Revere's midnight ride is often remembered as the beginning of his more public role in the American Revolution. However, for Revere, it was simply another step in his steady and determined journey toward a new nation. Through his quiet courage, his leadership, and his unwavering commitment to the cause of liberty, Paul Revere helped shape the early years of the United States, making him one of the most important and steadfast figures of the American Revolution. In the spring of 1775, as the flames of rebellion ignited across the American colonies, Paul Revere found himself deeply involved in the defence of his home city, Boston. The British had already begun their military occupation, and the colonial resistance was tightening its grip. Revere, whose contributions had already made him a recognised figure in the revolutionary cause, now turned his attention fully to the Siege of Boston. This period would see him expand his role from messenger and engraver to military organiser and leader in the burgeoning Continental Army. As the British forces entrenched themselves within Boston, the colonial militias surrounding the city kept up a steady resistance, attempting to cut off the British supply lines and prevent any further military advances. This was a time of both opportunity and peril for the revolutionaries. With the British soldiers occupying Boston, the Patriots knew that decisive action was needed, and Revere was among those who helped strategize for the defense. Revere's efforts during the Siege of Boston are often overshadowed by his more famous midnight ride. However, the work he did behind the scenes during this time was just as crucial to the colonial cause. As the British forces sought to solidify their control over the city, Revere helped organise the transportation of military supplies, including much-needed artillery, and assisted in fortifying key positions to ensure the safety of the colonial militias. In late 1775, Revere was given a special assignment by the Massachusetts Provincial Congress to help manage the defence of the colony's fortifications. One of the most important tasks he faced was securing cannons and other heavy weaponry to be used in the defence of Boston. This task proved to be a monumental undertaking, as Revere worked diligently to source the necessary equipment from other colonies and to bring them safely into the hands of the militias. This behind-the-scenes coordination was essential to the growing strength of the revolutionary forces as the Continental Army began to take shape. In addition to his logistical work, Revere became actively involved in the military strategy of the Siege of Boston. With his knowledge of the city's streets and surrounding areas, he was well positioned to assist in planning for the defense of key locations. Revere's role was not one of direct combat. He was not a soldier in the traditional sense, but he was deeply involved in ensuring that the colonial militias were well prepared for any encounter with the British forces. Revere's involvement in the Siege of Boston also included overseeing the construction of defensive works around the city. As part of his duties, he supervised the building of fortifications, which were essential in protecting the colonial forces. This was no small task, as the British forces were better equipped and more experienced. However, Revere's organizational skills, honed from years of running his silversmithing business, were invaluable in coordinating the efforts of the militias. One of the most famous stories from this period involves Revere's successful transfer of cannons from the fort at Ticonderoga to the Continental Army. These cannons were critical to the militia's defense, and their arrival in Boston was a turning point in the siege. Revere worked tirelessly to ensure that the cannons were brought to Boston, travelling through difficult terrain and risking his life to ensure the artillery reached the Continental forces. His work in bringing these cannons to the besieged city contributed to the eventual success of the militias in maintaining their defensive positions. The British, realizing that they could not maintain their hold on Boston indefinitely, began to make plans to evacuate. Revere's contributions during the siege were instrumental in ensuring that the colonial militias were well equipped to defend themselves. The siege itself lasted for nearly a year, but the eventual withdrawal of the British in March 1776 marked a significant victory for the revolutionaries. Despite his crucial role during the Siege of Boston, Revere's contributions to the revolutionary cause were often understated. While other figures, such as George Washington and Samuel Adams, took centre stage in the public eye, Revere worked quietly and tirelessly in the background. His leadership, organisation, and logistical support helped to keep the colonial forces strong and united in the face of British aggression. In addition to his military and logistical efforts, Revere continued his work as a silversmith and engraver during this period. He was known for his skill in engraving, and his work during the siege included engraving a number of documents and materials for the colonial cause. These pieces were used to rally support for the revolution, and they served as powerful symbols of resistance against British rule. The Siege of Boston, while a difficult and uncertain time for the colonists, was also a period in which Paul Revere's leadership and commitment to the cause of independence shone through. Revere, ever the steady and reliable figure, became a key player in the revolution's early military successes. His ability to navigate the complexities of logistics, strategy, and leadership in a time of war made him an invaluable asset to the colonial cause. As the siege ended and the British evacuated Boston, Revere's role in the American Revolution was far from over. The lessons learned during the siege, as well as the relationships he'd built with fellow patriots, would continue to shape his efforts in the years to come. But for now, Revere's involvement in the Siege of Boston stands as a testament to his unwavering commitment to the cause of liberty and his quiet but essential contributions to the struggle for independence. With the British forces withdrawing from Boston in 1776, the American Revolution entered a new phase. Paul Revere, having played a crucial role in organising the colonial militias and supporting the Continental Army's defence of Boston, now found himself in the midst of a larger and more widespread conflict. The Declaration of Independence had been signed, and the colonies were officially at war with Britain. Revere's contributions to the cause of independence continued, but they evolved as the revolution spread across the newly formed United States. In the early days of the war, Revere continued his work as an engraver and military organizer. Though not a soldier in the traditional sense, his skills as a craftsman and communicator remained essential to the war effort. His engraving work, which had already made an impact with the famous Boston Massacre image, now became part of the broader effort to unite the colonies and rally support for the cause. Revere was commissioned to produce engravings and other materials to support the revolutionary cause, helping to spread news of victories and mobilize troops. Despite his behind-the-scenes role, Revere's connection to the military effort continued. His organizational skills, developed over years of managing his silversmithing business, were now being applied to military logistics. He was involved in efforts to secure supplies, organize troops, and help ensure the smooth movement of resources for the Continental Army. His work was crucial in ensuring that the militias had the necessary materials to fight on the front lines, and his ability to coordinate and manage these efforts was invaluable. One of the most important moments of Paul Revere's post-Boston siege career came in 1777, when he was sent on a mission to secure intelligence about British movements in the north. This mission took Revere to New York, where he was tasked with gathering information about the movements of British troops. The intelligence he gathered was vital to the Continental Army's planning for future engagements. Revere, while never a commander in the traditional military sense, played an instrumental role in gathering information that could tip the balance of power in the war. Revere's work during this time wasn't limited to logistical coordination. He also played an active role in engaging with the public, ensuring that the cause of independence remained strong throughout the war. He worked with various committees and groups, often behind the scenes, to keep the war effort moving forward. His ability to inspire others to action, through both his work and his words, made him a key figure in the revolutionary movement. In addition to his work for the Continental Army, Revere remained involved in his business and family life. Despite the war raging around him, he continued to produce silverware and other products in his shop, which remained an important part of his livelihood. The war had not only changed the political landscape of the colonies, but also disrupted the lives of everyday people like Revere. Yet, he continued to balance his duties as a father and a businessman with his commitment to the revolutionary cause. As the war wore on, Revere's role evolved further. In 1779, he was appointed as the Deputy Quartermaster General for the state of Massachusetts, overseeing the procurement and distribution of supplies for the militia. This was a significant responsibility, and it marked a new chapter in Revere's involvement in the war. Though he had been a key player in the early days of the Revolution, his military duties now took on a more official and organized nature. His ability to manage the logistics of the war effort was critical, and his reputation as a reliable and steadfast leader grew. By 1781, the war was nearing its conclusion. The British, weary and stretched thin, were beginning to lose their hold on the colonies. The Battle of Yorktown in October 1781 marked a decisive victory for the Continental Army, and with it, the American revolutionaries secured their independence. Revere, who had played his part in supporting the army with resources, intelligence, and logistics, saw the fruition of his work. After the war, Revere returned to his life as a businessman and family man. The country he had helped to create was still in its infancy, and there was much work to be done. Revere's contributions during the war were significant, but he would not be among the figures celebrated in the same way as George Washington or Thomas Jefferson. His role, however, was no less important. Through his quiet but steady commitment to the cause of independence, Revere helped ensure that the new nation would have the resources and support it needed to fight against the British. In the years following the Revolution, Revere remained a respected figure in Boston. He continued his work as a silversmith and engraver, now known not just for his craft but for his contributions to the cause of American independence. He was involved in various civic duties and became a respected elder in his community, though he remained largely out of the spotlight. Paul Revere's journey through the American Revolution was one of steady determination. From his famous midnight ride to his work with the Continental Army and his ongoing contributions to the war effort, Revere's life was a testament to the quiet strength and resilience of those who helped to shape the new United States. His legacy is marked not just by his ride, but by the countless small but significant contributions he made to the cause of liberty and independence. By 1781, the American Revolution had come to a victorious end, and Paul Revere found himself transitioning into a new phase of life, The hard-won independence of the United States opened the door for Revere to return to his work as a silversmith, though his life was forever altered by his involvement in the revolutionary cause. Revere, now in his late 40s, faced the challenge of rebuilding his business in a new America, one that was still in the process of establishing its identity and systems of governance. In the years following the war, Revere's life was marked by a steady return to the silversmithing and engraving work that had originally defined his career. His reputation as a master craftsman was well established, and he found steady business as the new nation began to flourish. Boston, his hometown, was rapidly developing as a commercial centre, and Revere capitalized on the growing demand for finely crafted goods. Silver spoons, teapots, and intricate engravings were in high demand as the country's elite sought to define their new identity through luxurious goods and symbols of refinement. Revere's success as a silversmith during these years was not without challenges. The war had disrupted many industries, and the economic instability that followed was felt by many in the artisan community. Yet Revere's steady work ethic and established reputation allowed him to weather the storm. As he continued to craft high-quality silverware and create engravings, he began to receive commissions that reflected his growing status as not just a skilled craftsman, but a respected figure in post-revolutionary America. In addition to his silversmithing work, Revere took on more civic duties in the years after the Revolution. His reputation as a patriot and a leader in Boston made him a natural choice for public service. He became actively involved in local politics, serving on various committees and contributing to the development of the city. He helped establish public institutions, including the Boston Water Works, which were crucial for the city's growth and modernization. These civic engagements allowed Revere to remain a relevant figure in Boston's development, even as his days of military service had come to a close, though his direct involvement in the military aspects of the revolution had ended. Revere's dedication to the country's welfare remained unwavering. He continued to engage in public life, working to strengthen the infrastructure and economy of the young nation. His work as a civic leader was a natural extension of his role in the Revolutionary War, where he had played a significant part in organizing and supporting the Continental Army's efforts. However, Revere's life was not solely dedicated to his craft and civic duties. He also faced personal challenges. In 1773, Revere's wife, Sarah, passed away at a young age, leaving him to raise their children alone. This loss, though tragic, did not diminish Revere's sense of responsibility. He continued to care for his children and provide for them, becoming a devoted father who sought to give his family a secure and prosperous future. In 1777, Revere remarried to Rachel Walker, and together they had 8 children, further solidifying his role as a family man in the post-revolutionary era. Revere's family life remained a central part of his identity. Despite his public and professional duties, he took pride in being a father and a husband. His second marriage was a source of comfort and stability in a time of great change, and he was known to be a loving and attentive father to his children, all of whom would go on to contribute to the new American society in their own ways. In the 1790s, Revere's business expanded beyond the silversmithing shop. His entrepreneurial spirit led him to invest in other ventures, including the establishment of a copper rolling mill, which would prove to be a valuable contribution to the country's growing industrial sector. The mill's operations would provide essential materials for the development of infrastructure, including copper for coins and other products necessary for the new government. This venture marked a turning point for Revere, as he moved from being a simple artisan to a businessman with a broader impact on the country's economic development. In addition to his work in silversmithing and industry, Revere's engravings continued to be a significant part of his legacy. He created a number of engravings that reflected the progress and challenges of the young nation. His artistic contributions helped shape the visual identity of the United States, and his work continues to be admired for its craftsmanship and historical importance. As the 1790s drew to a close, Revere's contributions to the new nation were firmly established. He had helped shape the revolution, supported the war effort, and contributed to the nation's economic development. His legacy, while not as publicly celebrated as some of his contemporaries, was nonetheless significant. Revere's life was a testament to the quiet strength and steady resolve that had carried him through both the trials of war and the challenges of rebuilding a new nation. By the time of his death in 1818, Paul Revere had lived a life marked by steady commitment, family devotion, and a deep love for the country he helped to build. His work as a silversmith, engraver, and civic leader had left a lasting impact on Boston and the young United States. Though his name may have been overshadowed by other revolutionary figures, Revere's contributions to the cause of independence and to the growth of the new nation cannot be overstated. His story, from his early days as a craftsman to his later years as a businessman and civic leader, reflects the resilience and determination that defined the American Revolution. As the new century unfolded, Paul Revere found himself in a period of significant personal and professional growth. Though the American Revolution had ended, the country was still in its infancy, with many challenges and opportunities ahead. Revere, a skilled silversmith, engraver, and now a growing industrialist, continued to build on the legacy he had created during the war years. His business ventures, combined with his dedication to his family and community, ensured that Revere remained a respected figure in Boston well into his later years. One of the most notable developments during this time was the expansion of Revere's business interests. Having established a successful silversmithing career and become an engraver of considerable renown, Revere began to think beyond his original trade. Recognizing the growing demand for materials necessary to build the young nation, he expanded his work to include a copper rolling mill in 1801. This mill, located in Canton, Massachusetts, became a crucial asset to the American economy, providing copper sheets for use in a variety of industries, including coinage and shipbuilding. Revere's copper business played a vital role in the country's development during the early 19th century. Revere's decision to invest in the copper mill was driven by both personal ambition and a deep sense of national responsibility. The early years of the United States were marked by a growing need for industrial capacity, and Revere's mill helped to meet that demand. Copper was an essential material for a number of industries, particularly for the creation of coins and the building of naval ships. Revere's business, though initially focused on fine craftsmanship, had evolved into a thriving industrial enterprise that contributed to the United States' growing industrial infrastructure. The success of the copper mill was a testament to Revere's ability to adapt and innovate. At the time, industrial operations like his mill were still in their infancy in America, and the country's economy was heavily reliant on agriculture and imports. By establishing a successful domestic copper supply, Revere was not only making a mark as a businessman, but also helping to strengthen the young nation's independence from foreign trade. This venture was not without its challenges, as Revere had to navigate the complexities of establishing a new business in a rapidly changing economic landscape. However, his determination and foresight paid off, as the mill became a lasting contribution to American industry. In addition to his industrial success, Revere's role as a father and family man remained a cornerstone of his life during this period. In 1773, Revere's first wife, Sarah Orne, passed away, leaving him to care for their children. In 1777, he remarried, this time to Rachel Walker, with whom he had 8 children. His growing family provided him with both joy and responsibility, and he worked tirelessly to provide for them, ensuring they had the opportunities to thrive in the new nation. Revere's dedication to his family was evident in his constant efforts to create a stable and prosperous future for his children. He remained a devoted father, teaching his children the values of hard work, responsibility, and community service. Revere's involvement in the civic life of Boston also continued during these years. He was active in local politics and public service, serving as a member of the Massachusetts state legislature and participating in various civic organizations. His reputation as a respected leader in Boston grew, and he was involved in a variety of local projects, including the establishment of a public water supply system. Revere's sense of duty to his community was unwavering, and he remained committed to contributing to the city's growth and development. Despite the demands of his business, Revere remained connected to his silversmithing roots. He continued to create fine silver works, including teapots, bowls, and ornate household items, which remained in high demand among Boston's elite. His craftsmanship was still celebrated, and his work was considered among the best in the region. However, Revere's business interests had expanded far beyond the confines of his silversmithing shop. His industrial ventures, including the copper mill, became his primary focus, and he continued to build his reputation as an entrepreneur who was both innovative and committed to the future of the United States. As the years passed, Revere's contributions to the country, both through his business ventures and his civic involvement, became more widely recognized. While he was still known for his role in the American Revolution, his later years saw him become a symbol of the new nation's industriousness and growth. His ability to navigate the challenges of a rapidly changing economy, while remaining grounded in his personal values and commitment to his family, allowed him to thrive during a time of great change. Though Revere was no longer directly involved in the military aspects of the revolution, his continued work as a businessman, father, and civic leader ensured that his legacy would live on. His copper mill provided essential materials for the country's growing economy, and his silversmithing work continued to be revered for its quality and craftsmanship. Revere's life during this period was a testament to his ability to adapt and succeed in the face of new challenges, and his contributions to the United States were significant, both in terms of industry and public service. By the time the 1810s arrived, Revere had established himself as one of Boston's most respected figures. His contributions to American industry, his commitment to his family, and his continued engagement in civic life had made him an important figure in the growth of the young nation. Though he would pass away in 1818, Revere's legacy lived on in the industrial achievements he had pioneered, the family he had raised, and the community he had helped build. As Paul Revere entered the 1810s, he was nearing the end of a life filled with remarkable contributions to both the early United States and the city of Boston. By this time, the Revolution had passed into history, but the mark it left on Revere was indelible. Though he had spent many years living quietly in the aftermath of his most famous ride, Revere's later years were marked by continued service, both in his business and in his community. His work as a silversmith, engraver, and businessman continued to influence the American economy, while his involvement in civic life ensured his legacy as one of Boston's most respected figures. In the years following the establishment of his copper rolling mill, Revere's contributions to industry became increasingly significant. The mill, located in Canton, Massachusetts, provided the country with much-needed copper, an essential material for the minting of coins, the building of ships, and a host of other uses. The copper industry, still in its infancy in the United States, benefited greatly from Revere's foresight and determination. His mill was one of the few sources of domestically produced copper, and it helped strengthen the United States' industrial capacity. Despite the booming success of his copper mill, Revere never lost sight of his roots as a silversmith. He continued to produce fine silver pieces for Boston's elite, even as his industrial ventures expanded. His silver work remained highly regarded, and his reputation as a craftsman remained intact. Revere had always been deeply committed to his craft, and in his later years he still worked on intricate pieces of silverware, including silver spoons, tea sets, and ceremonial items. His craftsmanship was celebrated for its detail and beauty, and his works were often passed down through generations. Revere's family life continued to be an important part of his identity during these years. In 1773, Revere's first wife, Sarah, passed away, and he remarried in 1777 to Rachel Walker, with whom he had 8 children. His children, whom he raised with great care, grew up in a nation that was still evolving. Revere was not only a loving father, but also a provider who worked tirelessly to ensure his children's futures. His family, many of whom would go on to contribute to various industries and fields of expertise, benefited from his dedication and hard work, As Revere's business and family life flourished, his involvement in the civic affairs of Boston remained steady. He continued to serve his community in various capacities, including in public offices and local organizations. His contributions to the city's growth were seen in everything from his work on the water supply system to his involvement in the Boston public schools. Though he was primarily known for his silversmithing and business ventures, Revere was also deeply committed to the improvement of his city and the well-being of its citizens. Even as his work continued to thrive, Revere's health began to decline in the final years of his life. Despite this, he maintained a strong work ethic and continued to oversee his copper mill and silversmithing business. However, the demands of managing his growing industrial operations and caring for his family took their toll. By 1818, Paul Revere was nearing the end of his life. He passed away on May 10, 1818, at the age of 83, having lived a life full of accomplishment and service to his country. At the time of his death, Revere's fame was still largely tied to his legendary midnight ride. Though his business ventures had brought him prosperity and respect, his name had not yet been fully associated with the broader industrial contributions he had made to the nation. His legacy, like many other patriots of the American Revolution, would take years to fully emerge. The country, still in its formative years, had yet to fully recognize the contributions of men like Revere, who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes to secure independence. However, in the years following his death, Revere's legacy would only grow. As the United States continued to expand and industrialize, his work in both silversmithing and copper production was recognized as pivotal to the nation's growth. His copper mill, which had provided essential materials for the country's developing economy, became a symbol of the industrial strength that would come to define the United States in the 19th century. Additionally, Revere's engravings, particularly his portrayal of the Boston Massacre, helped to cement his place in the pantheon of American revolutionaries. Revere's name, though associated primarily with his famous ride, is also linked to his contributions to the arts and industry. His work in silver and copper production, his leadership in Boston's civic life, and his unwavering dedication to the cause of independence ensured that his legacy would be remembered. Over time, Revere became a symbol of the industrious spirit that helped shape the new nation. His legacy was not just about one night of dramatic action. It was about a life spent in service to his family, his community, and his country. Today, Paul Revere is remembered not only as the man who made the midnight ride, but also as a key figure in the early industrial history of the United States. His contributions to American industry, his artistry, and his public service have left an enduring mark on the nation. Though his death marked the end of an era, his life and work continue to inspire and remind us of the quiet resolve and determination that helped shape the foundation of the United States. After Paul Revere's death in 1818, his legacy was not immediately recognized in the way it would later come to be. While he had played a significant role in the American Revolution, particularly with his famous midnight ride, his life's work was still largely tied to his craftsmanship and business achievements. The years following his passing saw his name quietly fade into the background of American history, overshadowed by the more prominent figures of the Revolution. But as time passed, Revere's influence would begin to resurface, especially as the United States continued to develop both industrially and politically. In the decades after his death, the American public began to slowly reassess the contributions of men like Paul Revere. Though his ride had long been celebrated in song and poem, the true scope of his impact on American industry and infrastructure was not fully appreciated until later in the 19th century. As the United States industrialized, Revere's pioneering role in copper production and his work in the silversmithing trade became more widely acknowledged. One of the key factors that contributed to the growth of Revere's legacy was the expanding role of industry in American life. The Industrial Revolution in the United States gained momentum in the mid-1800s, and figures like Revere, who had contributed to the nation's early industrial base, were eventually seen as visionaries. Revere's copper mill, established in 1801, had played a critical role in supplying the country with a vital resource that was needed for the minting of coins and the construction of ships. His decision to venture into copper production had positioned him as one of the first industrialists in America, and as the economy grew, so too did the recognition of his contributions. Revere's silversmithing legacy also gained more attention as his work continued to be revered for its exceptional quality. His silverware, which had once been reserved for the wealthy elite of Boston, was now appreciated as part of the historical fabric of the United States. His craftsmanship was recognized as a reflection of the high standards and dedication that had defined the early American artisans. The fine details and artistry in his work helped elevate the status of American-made goods, contributing to a sense of national pride during a time when the country was establishing itself as an economic power. As Revere's contributions to American industry became more appreciated, his role as a patriot and revolutionary hero began to be re-examined. The story of his midnight ride, though it had been immortalized in Longfellow's poem in 1860, was not the only thing that defined his legacy. The ride was a symbol of the quiet but vital work of so many in the colonial resistance. Revere, though not a prominent military leader or politician, had played a crucial role in organizing the colonial resistance, distributing information, and providing logistical support to the Continental Army. His ride, in many ways, represented the collective efforts of ordinary men who fought for independence. Throughout the 19th century, Revere's life began to be memorialized in ways that extended beyond the famous ride. Monuments and memorials to Revere were built, particularly in Boston, where he'd spent much of his life. The most notable of these was the Paul Revere House, which became a symbol of both his personal legacy and the spirit of the American Revolution. Located in Boston's North End, the house was preserved as a historical landmark and became a place where future generations could learn about the man who had made such a profound impact on the country's early years. In the years following the Civil War, Revere's legacy continued to grow, particularly as the United States became more self-assured in its identity as a nation. As the country expanded, both territorially and industrially, the contributions of men like Revere, who had helped lay the groundwork for the nation's growth, were increasingly appreciated. His role in both the Revolutionary War and the early industrialization of the country became central to the understanding of how America had emerged as a global power. By the mid-19th century, Revere was firmly established in the collective memory of the American people. His image had become synonymous with the spirit of patriotism and industriousness that defined the early years of the United States. His work in the copper industry, silversmithing, and his unwavering commitment to the revolutionary cause were recognized as integral parts of America's foundation. The recognition of his contributions transcended the specific acts of bravery or heroism that he'd performed. It reflected the broader contributions of countless individuals who had built the country through quiet, steadfast work. As Revere's legacy continued to grow in the decades following his death, his influence was also felt in the arts. His engravings, which had once served as a tool of revolutionary propaganda, continued to inspire future generations of American artists. His artistic style, combined with his commitment to precision and craftsmanship, became a model for American engravers and artisans. His contributions to American art and design helped to establish a unique American aesthetic, one that was grounded in both European traditions and the emerging identity of the United States. Through the 19th century and beyond, Paul Revere's name would continue to be honored as a symbol of both the individual and collective efforts that had shaped the United States. From the Revolution to the Industrial Revolution, from the silversmith's shop to the copper mill, Revere's contributions were recognized as foundational to the country's growth and success. Revere's legacy, once largely confined to the realm of patriotic legend, had evolved into a recognition of his multifaceted contributions to the development of the United States. His life was a testament to the quiet strength and resolve of ordinary people who helped to build a nation. Though Revere's name was forever linked to the Midnight Ride, his broader impact on the American Revolution and the early years of the United States has become increasingly clear with the passage of time. While Paul Revere's contributions to the American Revolution and the early industrial economy were significant, it was in the years following his death that his legacy became intertwined with myth and legend. The 19th century saw the transformation of Revere from a skilled craftsman and patriot into a symbol of American heroism, amplified by both the work of writers and the growing national pride of the United States. In 1860, nearly half a century after Revere's death, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow published his famous poem, Paul Revere's Ride, which immortalized the midnight ride in American folklore. Longfellow's poem, though not entirely historically accurate, captured the essence of the moment and elevated Revere to the status of national hero. In the poem, Revere's ride became a symbol of the American spirit, brave, resolute, and willing to act when the time came to defend liberty. The poem was not just a recounting of an event, it was a story that resonated with the ideals of the young nation. Longfellow's choice of language, imagery, and the simple but powerful refrain, "One if by land, two if by sea," brought the story of Revere's ride into the hearts and minds of Americans, young and old. The ride was no longer just an important military mission. It became the defining moment of Revere's life, and a rallying cry for the ideals of freedom and independence. However, Longfellow's poem, while it solidified Revere's place in the American imagination, also contributed to the development of a somewhat exaggerated or romanticized view of his life. Revere's actual role in the midnight ride was more subdued than the poem suggests. Though Revere did indeed warn the militia of the British advance, the ride was a collective effort, and other riders like William Dawes and Samuel Prescott also played crucial roles in the warning. In Longfellow's version, Revere was presented as the lone hero, galloping through the night with a single purpose, to alert the colonial militias and ignite the revolutionary fire. The romanticization of Revere's ride in Longfellow's poem became so ingrained in American culture that it overshadowed his other significant contributions to the Revolution and the early Republic. The emphasis on his individual ride led to a distortion of his broader role in the Revolution, which had been that of a dedicated patriot who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes to support the cause of independence. This mythic version of Revere as the solitary rider who sparked the revolution with his courageous ride continued to shape how later generations remembered him. Throughout the latter half of the 19th century, Revere's life and achievements were increasingly celebrated through monuments, schools, and public commemorations. In Boston, the city where he'd spent most of his life, his legacy was carefully preserved. The Paul Revere house, the home where he had lived for many years, became a prominent historical landmark. It was preserved and open to the public as a way to honour Revere's life and work. Visitors from across the country came to see the house, which had been a site of both domestic life and revolutionary history. In addition to the house, several statues and plaques were erected in Revere's honour, including the famous equestrian statue of Paul Revere in the North End of Boston. This statue, created by artist Cyrus Dallin in 1940, depicted Revere on horseback, symbolising his bravery in the famous midnight ride. The statue, like Longfellow's poem, presented Revere as a symbol of American heroism and resilience, further solidifying his place in the American cultural consciousness. Revere's mythic status also began to gain recognition outside of Boston. His story spread across the nation as an example of selfless patriotism and courage. Schools, streets, and towns were named in his honour, and his name became synonymous with the founding ideals of the United States. The story of his ride, bolstered by the poem, became one of the most iconic tales of the American Revolution, embodying the spirit of the struggle for freedom. However, the growing myth of Revere as a singular hero also led to the overshadowing of other contributions he'd made. While the poem and monuments elevated his status, they did not always account for the collective efforts of the many men and women who fought for independence. In the years that followed, historians would seek to correct some of the mythic exaggerations, but by then Revere's place in American history was firmly entrenched as a larger-than-life figure. Despite the embellishments surrounding his story, Revere's actual contributions were significant and multifaceted. As an early industrialist, he played a pivotal role in the country's economic development. His copper mill, for example, was one of the first in the United States and was essential in providing the materials needed for the minting of coins and other critical industries. His work in silversmithing and engraving helped shape the nation's identity as it established itself both culturally and economically, but the myth of the midnight ride, as popularized by Longfellow, would continue to eclipse these other achievements in the public imagination. As the 20th century approached, Revere's legacy continued to be celebrated, though it was increasingly recognized that his contributions extended far beyond the famous ride. He was an industrial pioneer, an artist, and a civic leader. Yet his role in the Revolution, cemented by Longfellow's poem, remained his most famous contribution. By the time the United States entered the 20th century, Paul Revere was regarded as one of the nation's iconic figures. His role as a patriot, a symbol of courage, and a representative of American values continued to be celebrated, and though some aspects of his story had been mythologized, his life as a craftsman, an industrialist, and a quiet revolutionary remained at the core of his enduring legacy. By the turn of the 20th century, Paul Revere had become firmly entrenched in the American consciousness as a symbol of patriotism, bravery, and the spirit of independence. Longfellow's famous poem had long since cemented his place in American folklore, but as the nation grew, so too did the recognition of Revere's many contributions to the country. Over the decades, Paul Revere's legacy would continue to be celebrated, albeit with an evolving understanding of his broader contributions beyond his midnight ride. The early 20th century saw Paul Revere's life and achievements being commemorated in numerous ways. Monuments, schools, and public institutions were named in his honor. Perhaps one of the most significant of these tributes was the Paul Revere House in Boston, which had been preserved and opened as a museum to offer visitors a glimpse into the life of the man behind the famous ride. The house became a historical landmark, symbolizing both Revere's personal life and his place in the history of the American Revolution. It was not only a site of revolutionary importance, but also a place where Revere's legacy as a craftsman and businessman could be appreciated. The 20th century also saw the creation of several statues in Revere's honor, the most famous being the iconic equestrian statue of him riding through the streets of Boston. This statue, erected in 1940, depicted Revere galloping on horseback, his face set with determination. It encapsulated the romanticized vision of the midnight ride, immortalizing Revere as the heroic figure who single-handedly warned the colonies of the British approach. The statue, though symbolic, solidified Revere's place as a patriotic icon in the eyes of the American public. The image of Revere riding through the night would become one of the most enduring symbols of American courage and independence. Beyond physical monuments, Revere's legacy continued to be celebrated in American popular culture throughout the 20th century. His story was retold in books, plays, movies, and television shows. Many of these retellings, inspired by Longfellow's poetic portrayal, continued to emphasize the singularity of Revere's midnight ride. The ride itself was elevated to mythic proportions, becoming the subject of countless retellings that focused on his courage, his patriotism, and his sense of duty. The myth of Paul Revere as the lone hero of the American Revolution remained a fixture in the collective memory of the nation. In the decades following his death, his life story became synonymous with the values of American exceptionalism, self-reliance, bravery, and the determination to fight for liberty. The emphasis on his midnight ride overshadowed the complexity of his life, which had been marked by both contributions to the Revolution and significant accomplishments in the fields of business, industry, and craftsmanship. Yet, as the 20th century progressed, there was a growing recognition that Revere's legacy extended far beyond that single night in April 1775. As the nation entered the 21st century, historical scholarship began to re-evaluate the full scope of Revere's impact on American society. Historians and biographers sought to highlight his contributions as an industrialist, silversmith, and engraver. Revere had played a pivotal role in the development of American industry, particularly through his copper mill, which provided essential materials for the minting of coins and the construction of ships. His ingenuity as an entrepreneur and his ability to adapt to the changing economic landscape were crucial in helping the United States establish itself as a growing industrial power. While Revere's famous ride remained central to his legacy, a more nuanced understanding of his life began to emerge. The fact that he had been more than just a messenger during the Revolution, that he had actively worked to support the Continental Army through his logistical work and craftsmanship, became an important aspect of his historical identity. Historians began to emphasize that his contributions had been both tangible and vital to the success of the Revolution. In this way, Revere's legacy as a patriot was more complex than the myth that had been handed down through the years. In recent decades, there has also been a shift toward acknowledging the collective nature of the American Revolution. While Revere's midnight ride had been romanticized as a singular act of bravery, it was, in fact, part of a larger network of patriots working together toward independence. Revere's role was undeniably important, but so were the efforts of the other riders and the many unsung individuals who supported the cause. This more inclusive understanding of the Revolution has led to a re-evaluation of Revere's place in history, not as the solitary hero, but as a member of a broader collective effort that contributed to the birth of the United States. Despite these evolving perspectives, Revere's place in popular culture remained secure. The image of him galloping through the streets of Boston is still one of the most enduring and recognizable representations of the American Revolution. Revere's name continues to be invoked as a symbol of the American spirit, embodying the qualities of courage, resolve, and determination that defined the early days of the United States. Today, Paul Revere is remembered not only for his midnight ride, but also for his significant contributions to the nation's industrial development and his role in the Revolution. His life, though often distilled into the myth of a single ride, was marked by a broader commitment to both his country and his craft. The Paul Revere of today is recognized as a man who helped shape both the early industrial economy and the patriotic foundation of the United States. As the 20th century unfolded, the preservation of historical sites and the commemoration of revolutionary figures became central to the growing national identity of the United States. Paul Revere's legacy in particular was celebrated and preserved not only through his mythical ride, but also through the physical spaces that held remnants of his life. The most significant of these was the Paul Revere House, located in the north end of Boston, where Revere had spent much of his life and played a crucial role in both the Revolution and the early development of the nation. The preservation of the Paul Revere House began in the late 19th century as Americans increasingly sought to protect and honor the sites where pivotal moments of the Revolution had occurred. In 1902, the house was purchased and saved from demolition by the Paul Revere Memorial Association, which sought to ensure that future generations could visit and reflect on the life of the man who had so profoundly impacted the nation. The house became a historical museum, preserving the home where Revere had lived with his family during the years leading up to the Revolution. It was a place that visitors could come to understand the personal life of Revere, beyond the myth of the midnight ride. The house itself, a modest structure by the standards of the time, offered a glimpse into the life of an artisan, patriot, and businessman. Though Revere's contributions to American history were significant, it was his everyday life, his family, his trade, and his home that offered a more personal connection to the history he helped shape. The Paul Revere House, preserved in its original form, became a symbol of the quieter, steadier work that underpinned the Revolution. Inside the house, visitors could see the rooms where Revere and his family had lived, workspaces where he had crafted his famous silver items, and even the small engraving studio where he had worked on political prints. The preserved spaces allowed people to connect with the everyday life of one of the American Revolution's most important yet underappreciated figures. It also highlighted the role of skilled artisans like Revere, who contributed to the Revolution not just through heroic acts, but through the quiet, vital work of supporting and sustaining the colonial cause. Throughout the 20th century, the Paul Revere House became a central site for those wishing to understand not just the legend of Revere, but the man behind the myth. Its preservation was integral to the broader movement in the United States to honor and protect the history of the Revolution and its heroes. As Americans began to look back on the early days of the nation with a sense of pride and nostalgia, the Paul Revere House stood as a reminder of the complex, multifaceted lives of the men and women who helped shape the country. The growing interest in Revere's life and legacy also led to further efforts to commemorate him through monuments and public recognition. In 1940, the famous equestrian statue of Paul Revere was erected in Boston, depicting him riding through the streets in his midnight ride. The statue, sculpted by Cyrus Dallin, has become one of the most iconic representations of Revere. It's located in the North End, not far from the Paul Revere House, and serves as a visual anchor for the neighbourhood's revolutionary history. The equestrian statue, like the Paul Revere House, plays an important role in how Revere is remembered today. While the statue focuses on the moment of his midnight ride, it also serves as a broader symbol of the American spirit, the bravery, resolve, and collective effort that defined the Revolution. The statue's placement near Revere's house reinforces the connection between Revere's legendary act of defiance and his more grounded life as a craftsman, businessman, and community leader. The preservation of Revere's house and the construction of monuments also contributed to the shift in how Revere was perceived by the public. No longer just a legend, Paul Revere became a symbol of the enduring values that had built the United States. His story, long romanticized and simplified into the image of a lone rider galloping through the night, became more nuanced in the 20th century. While the ride remained central to his legacy, Americans also began to recognize the importance of Revere's work in other areas, his industrial contributions, his service to his community, and his role as a patriot who worked quietly behind the scenes to support the cause of independence. In recent decades, the historical interpretation of Revere's life has become more inclusive and balanced. His legendary ride is still celebrated, but there's a greater understanding that his contributions extended beyond that single moment. Scholars and historians have emphasized his work as an artisan, his leadership in organizing local militias, and his role in the early industrial development of the United States. In this broader context, Revere's life reflects the collective effort that went into building the country. Today, the Paul Revere House continues to draw visitors from around the world who seek to connect with the history of the American Revolution. It remains a vital part of Boston's historical landscape and a key site for anyone wishing to learn more about the Revolution's unsung heroes. As the United States continues to grapple with its own identity and the legacies of its founding, Revere's story remains a powerful reminder of the complexity and depth of the individuals who contributed to the country's founding. Through the preservation of his house, the erection of monuments, and the continued study of his life, Paul Revere's legacy has been given a place of prominence in the national narrative. The man who once quietly rode through the streets of Boston, warning the colonists of impending danger, now stands as a symbol of American perseverance, ingenuity, and patriotism. The preservation of his legacy ensures that future generations will understand not just the myth of Paul Revere, but the full scope of his life and contributions to the creation of the United States. As we move further into the 21st century, Paul Revere's legacy continues to evolve and be re-evaluated in the context of modern American life. Revere, who was once predominantly known for his midnight ride, has been increasingly recognized as a symbol of the broader values that shape the United States. These values, hard work, ingenuity, community service, and patriotism, have become central to how Revere is viewed in contemporary society, not just as a hero of the American Revolution, but as a foundational figure in the creation of the American identity. In the present day, the myth of Paul Revere is still widely known and frequently invoked. His midnight ride remains a staple of American history textbooks, and Longfellow's poem continues to be taught in schools across the country. However, as the United States faces new challenges and reflects on its past, there is a greater understanding of how Revere's life exemplified the qualities that helped build the nation, particularly his role as a businessman and craftsman as well. As his work in advancing the early industrial sector, The 21st century has seen a growing interest in the lives of lesser-known historical figures, and Paul Revere has benefited from this re-examination. Scholars and historians are increasingly turning to his contributions outside of his famous ride, recognizing his efforts as a silversmith, engraver, and industrialist. His copper mill, established in the early 1800s, is now acknowledged as one of the first successful industrial operations in the United States, helping to meet the country's growing demand for copper for coinage, shipbuilding, and other industries. Revere's entrepreneurial foresight and leadership in establishing this mill marked him as one of the early American industrialists who helped pave the way for the country's economic expansion. Revere's engagement with early industrialization also serves as a powerful example of the adaptability and resilience required to build the new nation. At a time when many artisans were still working in small local workshops, Revere had the vision to create a factory-based business model that would go on to support the country's economy. His contributions to the development of American industry have only grown in significance as the United States has become one of the world's leading industrial powers. The recognition of Revere's industrial legacy is also being incorporated into the public's understanding of his place in history. Museums dedicated to his life, such as the Paul Revere House in Boston, now emphasize not just the legendary ride but also the complexity of his work as an artisan, businessman, and industrialist. Visitors to the museum learn about his craftsmanship in silversmithing and engraving, which reflected the spirit of the early republic, as well as the ways he helped build the industrial infrastructure that was essential to the United States' rise as an economic power. Modern reflections on Revere's life also examine his political and social views. Revere, like many figures of his time, navigated the complex and often contradictory issues surrounding race and class in early America. While he played an important role in the Revolution and in the development of the early United States, Revere, like many of his peers, participated in a society that still upheld the institution of slavery. His connections to Boston's elite, a class that often benefited from slavery, have led to conversations about the ways in which Revere's legacy intersects with the more uncomfortable aspects of American history. These discussions have prompted a broader conversation about the Founding Fathers and their roles in shaping a nation that would struggle with issues of racial inequality for centuries. In addition to the growing understanding of Revere's industrial contributions and social context, modern audiences have also turned to Revere's story as a reflection of the American spirit. His journey from a young silversmith to an industrial leader, a patriot, and an integral part of American history serves as a symbol of perseverance and determination. As the United States navigates the challenges of the 21st century, Revere's example reminds people of the qualities that helped establish the nation: hard work, vision, and an unyielding commitment to the common good. Revere's myth has also found new life in popular culture, albeit with a more nuanced portrayal. While Longfellow's poem still remains an essential part of how we remember Revere, modern adaptations and retellings have sought to highlight the full scope of his contributions. Documentaries, historical novels, and television programs have sought to tell Revere's story in a more comprehensive way, emphasizing his multifaceted role in the Revolution and in the early days of the Republic. These contemporary portrayals are helping to reshape public perceptions of Revere, moving beyond the lone rider to the industrious visionary figure who helped build the foundation of the United States. In recent years, Paul Revere has also become a symbol of resilience in the face of adversity. His life was not marked by dramatic, sweeping moments of history, but rather by steady, sustained contributions to the country he loved. In an age where instant gratification and recognition are often prioritized, Revere's example of quiet dedication to his work and to his community serves as a reminder that great achievements are often made over time and through persistence, rather than through flashpoints of dramatic action. Paul Revere's enduring legacy speaks not just to the ideals of the American Revolution, but also to the broader history of the United States as a nation built by many people, heroes and everyday citizens alike, who contributed to its creation and growth. Revere's life, now celebrated in museums, statues, and public institutions across the country, continues to serve as a touchstone for Americans to reflect on their shared history and the qualities that have shaped their identity. As we look to the future, Paul Revere remains a figure whose story resonates deeply with the ideals of American independence, hard work, and community. His mythic ride may still echo in the halls of American memory, but his real legacy, shaped by both his revolutionary actions and his industrious spirit, lives on in the continued progress and evolution of the United States. As the United States enters the 21st century, Paul Revere's name remains a symbol of the nation's founding ideals: liberty, perseverance, and courage. Though the specifics of his life are increasingly recognized as more complex than the romanticized version portrayed in Longfellow's poem, Revere continues to stand as a representative figure of American resilience and ingenuity. In modern times, his legacy is more than just the story of a midnight ride. It is a reflection of the spirit of a nation built on the contributions of countless individuals, many of whom were like Revere, working diligently in the background to forge a new country. The 21st century has brought with it an era of renewed reflection on the Founding Fathers and their roles in shaping the United States, including figures like Revere. While Revere's famous ride was a symbol of individual action, historians and educators have increasingly emphasized the collective effort that was required to secure independence and build a nation. Revere's story has become a key example of how the efforts of ordinary men and women, who were not always in the limelight, helped propel the United States toward its independence. In this way, Paul Revere has come to represent the quieter, steady contributions of many who helped form the backbone of the American Revolution. Revere's status as a hero of the Revolution, amplified by the poem and later popular culture, continues to be a source of inspiration for many. In a time when national identity is being continually re-evaluated, figures like Revere stand as reminders of the values that shaped the early nation. He embodied the ideals of self-reliance, bravery, and a fierce commitment to liberty, qualities that continue to be celebrated today. In the modern era, Revere's story is more accessible than ever. With the rise of digital media, documentaries, podcasts, and online platforms, Revere's legacy has found new life in educational content. His life is discussed not only in terms of his famous ride, but in the context of his role in the broader narrative of the American Revolution and the early industrial period. Today's audiences are able to access a more well-rounded portrayal of Revere's life, understanding his contributions to silversmithing, engraving, and industry, as well as his military and civic service. While his midnight ride remains central to his popular image, modern discussions of Revere emphasize the complexity of his character. He was not just the man on horseback, galloping through the night to warn of British forces. He was a father, a husband, a businessman, and a committed citizen. His role in the success of the American Revolution was multifaceted, including his participation in organizing the local militia, gathering intelligence, and assisting in the logistics of the war effort. His work as a silversmith and later as an industrialist helped shape the economic foundations of the young nation, making him a key player in the creation of the industrial sector in the United States. Revere's continued prominence in popular culture, despite the evolving understanding of his life, speaks to the enduring power of his image as a symbol of American courage and resolve. The iconic image of Revere riding through the night, warning the militias of the approaching British forces, has persisted because it embodies the spirit of resistance and individual action that was so important during the American Revolution. This image has been reproduced countless times in books, films, and artworks, and it remains one of the most recognized symbols of American independence. In the 21st century, Revere's legacy is also being reassessed in light of broader conversations about the Founding Fathers and their complicated legacies. As discussions around race, slavery, and equality continue to evolve, Revere's story is being analysed in the context of the contradictions present in the early years of the United States. While Revere was deeply committed to the cause of liberty, he, like many others of his time, lived in a society that upheld slavery and excluded women and non-white individuals from the rights and freedoms he fought to protect. This critical examination of his life, while acknowledging his significant contributions, is part of a larger effort to understand the complexities of America's founding. As part of this re-examination, historians are emphasizing that the story of the Revolution is not just about a few prominent leaders, but about the many individuals, like Revere, who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to bring about change. Revere's role as a member of the artisan class in Boston, someone who used his skills and influence to support the Revolution, reflects the collective effort of the American people. His life is a testament to the impact that even the quietest voices can have in shaping the course of history. In modern America, Revere's story continues to be taught in schools, celebrated in public monuments, and reflected in the values of the nation. The myth of the Midnight Ride may still hold a central place in American memory, but the fuller understanding of Revere's life has helped to provide a more complete picture of his role in American history. His example as a patriot, craftsman, businessman, and civic leader remains a powerful model for future generations, teaching them the importance of perseverance, responsibility, and community. Revere's life and legacy resonate not just as part of the past, but as a reflection of enduring values that continue to shape the present and the future of the United States. His story reminds us that the foundation of a nation is built not only on dramatic moments of heroism, but on the steady, persistent efforts of individuals working together for a common cause. Paul Revere's example, a symbol of both individual courage and collective determination, will continue to inspire Americans as they navigate the challenges of today and beyond. In the 21st century, Paul Revere's legacy is being critically re-evaluated in light of modern perspectives on history. The enduring myth of the Midnight Ride, immortalized by Longfellow's poem and solidified by centuries of retelling, still holds a prominent place in American memory. Yet, as our understanding of history becomes more nuanced and inclusive, the need to reassess Revere's life and his role in the American Revolution has grown. The contrast between the mythic figure of Revere and the man behind the legend has sparked renewed interest in his contributions to the nation's founding and in the complexities of his legacy. For much of American history, the narrative surrounding Paul Revere has been shaped by the image of him galloping through the night, warning the colonial militias of the British approach. Longfellow's 1860 poem, Paul Revere's Ride, painted a vivid picture of a lone hero, racing to the rescue of his fellow patriots. Revere's famous ride became a symbol of courage, of one man's selfless action in the face of danger, and it was this image that would come to define him for generations. However, as historians, scholars, and educators begin to take a more critical look at historical figures, the oversimplification of Revere's role in the American Revolution has become more evident. Revere was not the only rider to warn the militia of the British advance. In fact, William Dawes and Samuel Prescott also rode that night. While Revere's ride was certainly important, it was part of a larger collective effort to alert the American forces. Recognizing this fact does not diminish Revere's role, but helps to better situate him within the broader context of the American Revolution, where the actions of many individuals contributed to the outcome. This re-evaluation also takes into account the social and political context in which Revere lived. Like many of the founding fathers, Revere was a product of his time, and his legacy must be understood in light of the complexities of 18th century America. Although he is celebrated for his work in the Revolution and his commitment to the cause of liberty, Revere was also a man who lived in a society that was grappling with issues of slavery, racial inequality, and gender roles. The contradictions between the ideals of freedom and the realities of slavery and exclusion are essential to understanding the fuller picture of Revere's life and the era in which he lived. While Revere himself was a committed patriot and a staunch advocate for liberty, it's important to recognize that the Revolution did not bring immediate freedom for all people. Native Americans, African Americans, and women were excluded from the full benefits of the independence that was won in 1783. The fight for liberty was, for many, an incomplete struggle, Revere, like many other prominent figures of the time, benefited from a system that denied equal rights to large portions of the population. As modern scholars and educators grapple with these uncomfortable truths, Revere's legacy is being re-evaluated not just as a revolutionary hero, but also as a figure in a deeply flawed society. This critical approach to Revere's life, however, does not erase the importance of his contributions to the American Revolution and the creation of the United States. The growing understanding of his contributions to American industry, especially his pioneering work in copper production, places him as an essential figure in the nation's early industrialization. Revere's copper mill helped to meet the country's growing need for materials used in the minting of coins, the construction of naval ships, and the expansion of infrastructure. His industrial foresight was groundbreaking and helped establish the United States as an emerging industrial power. Revere's work as a silversmith and engraver also played a crucial role in shaping American art and design. His engravings, particularly his depiction of the Boston Massacre, helped galvanize public sentiment and mobilize support for the Revolution. As a silversmith, he contributed to the cultural identity of early America, producing high-quality, locally made goods that reflected the nation's emerging values of craftsmanship, self-reliance, and independence. The myth of Revere's solitary ride remains a potent symbol of American patriotism, but the broader, more complex narrative of his life offers a more complete understanding of his impact. As the United States reflects on its history, the need to move beyond simple, romanticized accounts of the past has become increasingly clear. Paul Revere's life, when viewed in its full context, becomes a story not only of revolutionary fervor, but also of the tensions, contradictions, and progress of a young nation struggling to reconcile its ideals with its realities. In the 21st century, Revere's legacy is part of the larger process of understanding the complexities of America's founding. His contributions to the Revolution and the development of American industry are now being viewed in tandem with a critical examination of the social and political forces that shape the country. As we continue to study Revere's life, we can appreciate his heroism while also acknowledging the limitations and contradictions of his time. This evolving view of Paul Revere underscores a broader shift in how Americans engage with their history. Rather than clinging to idealized one-dimensional figures, we're beginning to embrace the complexity and nuance of the past. Revere's story is no longer simply about one man's ride through the night. It is about the broader collective effort to create a nation. It is a story about the tensions between freedom and inequality, between individual action and collective struggle, and about the ways in which each generation shapes its understanding of its heritage. As the United States continues to evolve in the 21st century, Paul Revere's legacy remains a defining element of the nation's collective memory. Revere is often celebrated as a symbol of the American spirit, brave, dedicated, and unwavering in his commitment to liberty. But beyond the mythic version of Revere that we remember from Longfellow's poem, his true impact lies in the multifaceted ways he contributed to both the Revolution and the early development of the United States. Revere's influence on American identity is not confined to his role in the Revolution or his famous midnight ride. He represents the ethos of the American dream, an individual who, through hard work and persistence, contributed to the creation of a new nation. Born into modest circumstances, Revere worked diligently to become a successful silversmith and later an industrial innovator. His journey from an apprentice to an entrepreneur in the early years of the nation is a narrative that resonates with Americans who take pride in the idea of self-reliance and perseverance. The values that Revere embodied, work ethic, commitment to community, and a sense of responsibility to the greater good, continue to influence the nation's character today. As the United States has grown into a global power, Revere's life has come to be seen as a representation of the nation's capacity for growth and reinvention. Revere was not just a craftsman or revolutionary. He was also an early industrialist who saw the potential for manufacturing and production to support a growing nation. The copper mill that Revere founded was one of the first in the United States, and became a crucial component in the early stages of American industrialization. By understanding the importance of resource production and manufacturing, Revere helped lay the groundwork for the country's future economic success. His recognition of the importance of industry, particularly in a fledgling nation that sought to distance itself from European economic dependency, made him an important figure in the rise of American self-sufficiency. Revere's influence on American industry and entrepreneurship was significant, particularly in the context of the country's gradual shift from an agrarian economy to one centered around industry and manufacturing. Today, Revere's entrepreneurial spirit is celebrated as part of the larger narrative of American ingenuity and innovation. His work is often referenced as an example of how early industrialists helped build the foundation for the United States' emergence as an industrial leader in the 19th and 20th centuries. In many ways, Revere was a pioneer, not just in his trade, but in the way he understood the relationship between business, industry, and the broader national economy. The values Revere demonstrated during his life resonate deeply with modern Americans. The idea that one can rise from humble beginnings to become a key figure in the shaping of a nation is central to the American mythos. Revere's legacy is a reminder that America was not built by a few famous men, but by many individuals who worked tirelessly in their trades, innovated in their industries, and contributed to the success of the fledgling nation. His life represents the quiet contributions of ordinary people who, through their labor and ingenuity, helped create the United States as it exists today. In addition to his contributions to industry and craftsmanship, Revere's role as a symbol of patriotic sacrifice and dedication to the cause of liberty endures. His involvement in the American Revolution, particularly in his efforts to support the Continental Army, has left a lasting imprint on the nation's identity. While Revere's midnight ride became the most famous aspect of his life, it is important to recognize that his role in the revolution extended far beyond that moment. His work as a messenger, his engagement with local militias, and his logistical support for the Continental Army were all critical to the success of the revolution. Revere's quiet dedication to the cause of independence, his willingness to serve in whatever capacity was needed, and his ability to adapt to the needs of the time made him an invaluable member of the revolutionary effort. As modern Americans look back on Revere's legacy, his commitment to the ideals of the revolution, freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, remains a guiding force. His actions exemplify the notion that the fight for liberty was not just waged on battlefields, but through the actions of everyday people who, in their own ways, contributed to the creation of the United States. Revere's story is a reminder that each generation has the responsibility to uphold these ideals and to ensure that the values of freedom and equality continue to be upheld in the face of new challenges. Revere's place in the American consciousness extends beyond his role as a figure from the past. He's a symbol of the ideals that have shaped the United States and continue to define the country today. His life serves as a reflection of the perseverance, courage, and ingenuity that continue to be integral to the American identity. In a time when the nation is continuously redefining itself in the face of globalization, technological advancement, and social change, Revere's story reminds us of the enduring power of individual effort in shaping the destiny of a nation. Revere's legacy has been passed down through the generations as a model of American strength. His contributions to the revolution, his success as an entrepreneur, and his enduring symbol of courage have made him a figure whose memory continues to inspire. In the 21st century, Paul Revere remains an emblem of the American spirit, one that thrives on determination, innovation, and a deep commitment to liberty. As the United States moves forward, the lessons from Revere's life remain ever relevant, that through hard work, dedication, and a steadfast belief in the ideals of freedom, individuals can help shape the future of their country. As the United States faces the challenges of the 21st century, the story of Paul Revere offers an enduring source of inspiration. While Revere's name is forever linked to his midnight ride, the deeper understanding of his multifaceted contributions to both the revolution and the country's industrial growth allows him to be seen as more than just a figure in folklore. In today's world, his story is more relevant than ever, offering valuable lessons in courage, responsibility, and civic duty, traits that are crucial to navigating the complexities of the modern world. Revere's role in American history is often reduced to his ride through the night to warn the colonists of the British approach, but his contributions to the Revolution were much broader. His work as an organizer, silversmith, engraver, and businessman helped lay the foundation for the nation in its infancy. The ability to move from being an artisan to an industrial innovator, transitioning from craft to production, mirrors the transformation the United States underwent as it became a modern, industrial nation. Revere's ability to adapt to the times is an important lesson for today's world, where change is constant and innovation drives progress. In an era of technological disruption and global interconnectedness, Revere's adaptability to new industries and methods is a reminder that progress relies on individuals who are willing to take risks, innovate, and move beyond traditional boundaries. His successful venture into copper production during the early years of American industrialization was crucial in supplying the nation with materials needed for coinage, shipbuilding, and other industries. The copper mill he established helped to lay the groundwork for the country's economic expansion and self-sufficiency. Revere's example demonstrates how industries and economies are built through foresight, persistence, and a dedication to meeting the needs of society. Today, as industries evolve and technology continues to shape our economy, Revere's legacy reminds us of the importance of having a long-term vision, as well as the willingness to adapt and invest in emerging opportunities. Revere was not just a craftsman or a revolutionary hero. He was also an early industrialist, one of many individuals whose work helped make the United States an economic powerhouse. In a modern context, Revere's story offers insight into how personal initiative can help build entire industries and shape the future of a nation. Revere's story also carries significant relevance to the conversation around American values. He embodied the American dream in its truest sense, a person who came from humble beginnings and worked tirelessly to build a successful business and a legacy that would have a lasting impact on the nation. His life exemplified the values of hard work, dedication to community, and perseverance in the face of adversity. These values continue to resonate in the modern American context, where individual effort and resilience are seen as cornerstones of success. Furthermore, as the United States grapples with contemporary challenges such as income inequality, social justice, and political polarization, Revere's life provides a timely reminder of the role that civic engagement plays in shaping the future. Revere was not merely a passive participant in his community. He was actively involved in local governance, worked to establish public works such as Boston's water system, and used his influence as a respected artisan and patriot to help shape the city's future. His example underscores the importance of civic responsibility, both in times of national crises like the Revolution and in times of peace, when the stability and progress of society depend on individuals willing to contribute to the greater good. As the United States continues to evolve, Revere's story speaks to the enduring importance of participation, whether it's in the form of political engagement, community service, or contributions to the economy and industry. In a time when many Americans are feeling disconnected from traditional systems of power, Revere's legacy serves as a reminder that individual action, no matter how small, can collectively lead to profound change. Revere's commitment to the cause of liberty and his willingness to put everything on the line for his country's independence also resonates with modern American ideals. His sacrifice and dedication to the greater good exemplify the values of freedom and equality that continue to be at the heart of national discourse. As the United States works through issues related to civil rights, equality, and justice, Revere's story reminds us of the ongoing fight for freedom and the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of adversity. Additionally, as the United States continues to grapple with its diverse population, Revere's story is also an important point of reflection. in the ongoing conversation about race, equity, and inclusion. While Revere himself was a figure of his time, living in a society where slavery was still practiced, the broader struggle for independence that he participated in laid the groundwork for future efforts toward equality. The recognition that the nation's ideals of liberty and freedom were not initially extended to all people is part of the evolving narrative of Revere's legacy. Today, his life serves as a reminder that the struggle for true freedom and equality is an ongoing journey, one that requires continued effort, commitment, and progress. Paul Revere's life and legacy continue to serve as a powerful reflection of the values that have shaped American identity. His story is no longer just about a heroic ride. It is about the determination to serve one's country, adapt to changing times, and contribute to a nation's success. As the United States looks forward to the challenges of the 21st century, Revere's example offers a timeless lesson in the importance of resilience, vision, and civic engagement, values that continue to define the American character. As the 21st century progresses, the story of Paul Revere's midnight ride continues to hold a powerful place in the American imagination. His ride, immortalized by Longfellow's poem and repeated countless times in history books, films, and educational curricula, is not just a historical event, but a symbol of American bravery, resistance, and determination. In the context of today's society, the myth of Paul Revere has transcended its historical roots, evolving into a broader representation of the values that underpin American identity. The enduring power of Revere's myth lies in its ability to capture the spirit of independence and self-reliance. The image of Revere galloping through the streets of Boston, warning the colonial militias of the British advance, has become synonymous with the very essence of American courage. Even in an era where the country faces numerous challenges and complexities, Revere's ride remains a vivid representation of the willingness to stand up for freedom, to act decisively in the face of adversity, and to protect the ideals of liberty. In contemporary America, Revere's myth is invoked during times of national crisis. Whether it's a call for civil rights, military action, or social justice, Revere's ride serves as a metaphor for action and the courage required to confront injustice. The image of Revere warning the Patriots about British tyranny is still used to inspire people to rise up in defense of their rights, just as the revolutionaries did centuries ago. His legacy is not just about the events of one night, but about the continuous, enduring fight for freedom that resonates in American culture. Moreover, the myth of Paul Revere serves as a tool for American unity. In times of political division or national strife, the story of Revere is often used to remind people of the importance of standing together for a common cause. His role as a member of the Sons of Liberty, an organization dedicated to resisting British oppression, symbolizes the power of collective action. The Revolution, though led by figures like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, was also a movement fueled by the efforts of ordinary people like Revere. Today, his myth serves as a reminder that every individual has a role to play in shaping the nation's future, whether through political action, community involvement, or service to the country. Paul Revere's story also continues to be told as an emblem of resilience and perseverance. Revere was not a military commander or a politician, yet his contributions to the American cause were indispensable. His work as an artisan, engraver, and industrialist laid the foundation for the United States' burgeoning economy, while his bravery and selflessness during the Revolution made him a crucial part of the struggle for independence. His myth, therefore, represents the story of ordinary Americans who played extraordinary roles in shaping the country, demonstrating that greatness does not always come from positions of power, but from a commitment to the values of liberty and equality. In today's society, Paul Revere's myth is also relevant in discussions of leadership. While his midnight ride is often seen as an individual act of heroism, it is important to note that Revere was part of a larger network of individuals working together to achieve a common goal. His ride, though famously depicted as a lone journey, was part of a collective effort, and many other riders participated in the effort to warn the militias. The myth, therefore, reflects the power of teamwork and collaboration, a lesson that is still applicable in contemporary leadership. Revere's legacy teaches us that leadership is not solely defined by individual actions, but by the collective efforts that contribute to a larger cause. As Revere's myth endures in American culture, it is also subject to reinterpretation and re-examination. With the rise of critical historical analysis and a more nuanced understanding of the past, Revere's legacy is being explored in new ways. Scholars and educators are increasingly emphasizing the complexities of his life, including his role in the early industrial economy and his position within a society that was grappling with issues of inequality and injustice. This more balanced approach ensures that Revere's myth does not obscure the larger challenges faced by America during its early years, but instead encourages a deeper, more critical reflection on the values and ideals that shaped the nation. Today, Paul Revere's legacy is preserved not only in the historical narrative of the Revolution, but in the broader national consciousness. He is a symbol of the resilience of the American people, the power of individual action, and the enduring fight for freedom. His story, while rooted in the specific context of the 18th century, speaks to the values that continue to define the United States. As the country faces new challenges in the 21st century, whether in politics, the economy, or social justice, the myth of Paul Revere reminds us of the importance of courage, unity, and perseverance in the pursuit of a better future. In the end, Paul Revere's legacy is much more than the tale of a single ride. It is the story of a nation built on the efforts of countless individuals who work together to secure freedom, establish justice, and create a future where liberty could thrive. His myth, still relevant today, serves as a reminder of the power of collective action and the importance of standing up for what is right, even when the road ahead is uncertain. As America continues to grow and evolve, Revere's ride and the values it represents will remain a source of inspiration and a guiding light for future generations. As the United States moved into the 20th and 21st centuries, Paul Revere's life and legacy became an integral part of American educational curricula and national consciousness. His mythic midnight ride, once a relatively small episode in the larger history of the American Revolution, evolved into one of the most iconic events in the nation's founding story. The enduring image of Revere galloping through the night has been perpetuated in textbooks, public monuments, and national celebrations, cementing his place in American history as a symbol of courage, action, and selfless dedication to the cause of liberty. In the classroom, Revere's story is often introduced at an early age, typically during the study of the American Revolution. Longfellow's Paul Revere's Ride, with its stirring imagery and rhythmic cadence, has been a central text in the teaching of American history. The poem's catchy lines, one if by land, two if by sea, have become an indelible part of schoolchildren's memory, encapsulating the image of a single, heroic individual standing against overwhelming odds. The simplicity of the narrative, combined with the dramatic nature of Revere's Ride, makes it an appealing lesson in bravery and patriotism. However, as the study of history has evolved, educators have increasingly worked to present a more nuanced understanding of Revere's life and contributions. No longer is Revere's legacy simply a tale of one rider galloping to warn the militia. Instead, he's portrayed as a complex individual whose contributions to the American Revolution extended far beyond that one night. Teachers now include discussions about his work as a silversmith, engraver, and industrialist, highlighting the ways in which his business acumen and ingenuity contributed to the emerging economy of the young nation. In this broader view of Revere's life, his contributions to the Revolutionary War are contextualized within the larger network of colonial resistance. Historians have sought to highlight the many other individuals who played pivotal roles in the fight for independence, ensuring that Revere is understood as part of a collective effort rather than a solitary hero. This shift in perspective has helped students better appreciate the scope of the revolution and recognize that it was not just the actions of a few key figures that led to American independence, but the efforts of many who worked together to create change. The incorporation of Revere's broader legacy into public education also reflects the growing recognition of the complex history of the United States. As the country confronts issues such as racial inequality and the challenges of social justice, figures like Revere are being re-evaluated in light of their participation in a society that excluded certain groups from the freedoms they fought to protect. Educators are now teaching students about the contradictions in Revere's life. While he fought for the freedom of the colonies from British rule, he was part of a system that denied freedom to enslaved people and women. This more critical approach to historical figures encourages students to think about the ideals of freedom and liberty, and to question how those ideals were applied to different groups in American society. Public memory of Paul Revere continues to be shaped by monuments, historical sites, and commemorations. The Paul Revere House in Boston remains a prominent museum, attracting visitors from around the world who wish to connect with the revolutionary history of the United States. The house, preserved as a historical landmark, offers a window into Revere's domestic life, providing visitors with a tangible connection to the past. The house not only symbolizes Revere's legacy as a craftsman and revolutionary, but also reflects the broader story of the American Revolution, as it was a place where critical decisions were made and plans were laid to resist British rule. The Paul Revere Monument in Boston, which depicts him on horseback, is another central element in the public memory of Revere. This monument, installed in 1940, emphasizes Revere's role as the bold, courageous figure who warned the militias and rallied the patriots to action. While the monument continues to serve as a popular symbol of American patriotism, it also reflects the ongoing tension between myth and reality in the way Revere is remembered. The statue, like Longfellow's poem, focuses on the iconic, larger-than-life aspects of Revere's ride, reinforcing his image as a singular hero, while overshadowing the collective nature of the revolutionary effort. In the 21st century, as new forms of media and storytelling continue to emerge, Paul Revere's legacy continues to be shaped by the ways in which we communicate and celebrate history. Films, documentaries, podcasts, and digital platforms offer new ways to engage with his life, and these modern interpretations help to present a more comprehensive view of Revere's significance. These mediums also allow for a more inclusive exploration of Revere's life and its implications for contemporary issues, such as citizenship, civil rights, and the meaning of freedom in modern America. Public memory of Revere is also influenced by commemorations like Patriots' Day in Massachusetts, which honors the battles of Lexington and Concord and celebrates the role of local heroes like Revere. The annual reenactment of his midnight ride, though a historical fiction, continues to draw crowds and generate enthusiasm for the history of the American Revolution. It serves as both a celebration of Revere's role in the Revolution and a reflection of the ongoing interest in the ways his actions have shaped the nation's identity. Through these educational initiatives, historical sites, and cultural celebrations, Paul Revere remains a figure of enduring importance in American life. His story continues to serve as a powerful reminder of the individual contributions that make up the broader tapestry of American history. In the face of contemporary challenges, Revere's example of courage, dedication, and service to his country remains a beacon for those seeking to build a more just and equitable society. His legacy, shaped by both the myth and the man, will continue to inspire generations to come. The American historical narrative has long relied on key figures whose lives, deeds, and contributions symbolize the birth of the nation. Among these figures, Paul Revere holds a special place. His midnight ride has come to represent not just a single historical event, but the broader ideals of patriotism, resilience, and self-sacrifice that define the American story. In modern times, as the United States grapples with its evolving identity, Revere's memory offers a lens through which to examine the complexities of the country's revolutionary history and the way we remember and commemorate those who helped shape it. Paul Revere's legacy, particularly his midnight ride, is often seen through a lens of heroism. The myth of Revere galloping through the night to warn the militias of British forces embodies a narrative of singular action in defence of liberty. This myth has been magnified over centuries, becoming part of the national consciousness. Longfellow's poem, published in 1860, did much to solidify Revere as an enduring symbol of individual bravery in the fight for freedom. The simplicity of the poem's language and its rhythmic cadence made it accessible and memorable to generations of Americans. This mythic portrayal has, in many ways, come to define Revere's legacy in the public memory. However, in modern scholarship and public discourse, there is a growing recognition of the need to move beyond the myth of the lone rider and appreciate the broader historical context in which Revere lived. The American Revolution, after all, was not the work of a single individual, but a collective effort involving thousands of people, many of whom remain less visible in the historical record. Revere himself was one of many who played an important role in the struggle for independence. His midnight ride, though important, was just one of his many contributions. His work as an engraver, a silversmith, and an industrialist helped to shape the nation in more ways than his famous ride ever could. Revere's life can now be seen as a reflection of the values of early American society. Values that, while foundational, were also deeply problematic. For example, Revere, like many of his contemporaries, participated in a society that excluded women, enslaved people, and indigenous populations from the rights they fought to defend. This tension between Revere's dedication to liberty and the exclusions that existed in his world is a crucial part of modern reinterpretations of his legacy. As the United States confronts its complicated history, figures like Revere serve as both symbols of progress and reminders of the unfinished work of building a more just and equal society. As the nation evolves, so too does its memory of the Revolution and the figures that defined it. Public memory of Paul Revere has expanded in recent years to include more critical reflections on his role in the American Revolution. While the famous Midnight Ride continues to serve as a symbol of American independence, there is increasing emphasis on understanding Revere as part of a larger network of people working toward the same cause. The legacy of Revere is now understood not just in terms of the mythic hero, but as part of the collective effort that led to the birth of the United States. Paul Revere's memory is shaped by more than just history books and poems. Monuments, museums, and historical reenactments continue to play a significant role in keeping his story alive. The Paul Revere House in Boston remains a central site in the public's understanding of his life. It is not only a historical landmark, but a symbol of the early American artisan's role in shaping the nation. The house gives visitors a tangible connection to the life of Revere, emphasizing his work as a silversmith and engraver, as well as his involvement in the Revolution. The preservation of his home allows for a deeper understanding of the man behind the myth and the ways in which his work contributed to the economic and social fabric of early America. Moreover, the equestrian statue of Paul Revere, installed in 1940 in Boston's North End, continues to serve as an enduring tribute to his legendary midnight ride. The statue, which depicts Revere galloping through the streets with urgency, reinforces the image of the hero who acted decisively to protect liberty. While this monument continues to resonate with modern audiences, it also reflects the ways in which public memory has often been simplified, focusing on Revere's symbolic role rather than the complexities of his actions and contributions. Modern portrayals of Revere's legacy often reflect the ongoing tension between myth and reality. Films, books, and documentaries continue to recount the famous ride, while also grappling with the larger implications of Revere's life and times. The 21st century has brought a renewed focus on the broader context of the Revolution, emphasizing that while figures like Revere played crucial roles, the success of the independence movement was the work of many individuals, both visible and invisible. As such, Revere is now seen less as a solitary figure and more as a representative of the collective action that led to the creation of the United States. Paul Revere's memory is now being shaped by contemporary issues, as the United States continues to navigate complex conversations about race, inequality, and the meaning of freedom, figures like Revere are being reconsidered in light of these discussions. Revere's legacy, once celebrated largely for his heroism, is now part of a broader conversation about the need to reconcile the ideals of the American Revolution with the realities of its social and political landscape. The myth of Revere as a lone hero serves as a powerful reminder of the early ideals of liberty, but the full story of his life invites reflection on the ongoing work of making those ideals a reality for all people. Ultimately, Paul Revere's legacy serves as both a symbol of the American Revolution and a lens through which to examine the complexities of American identity. His life, both the myth and the man, offers valuable lessons in courage, community, and the continued pursuit of freedom. As the United States moves forward, Revere's story remains a crucial part of the national memory, reminding us of the perseverance required to achieve independence and the work still left to do in realizing the full promise of liberty. As we come to the end of Paul Revere's remarkable journey, it is clear that his legacy continues to resonate with Americans more than 2 centuries after his death. Revere, a man who once worked in his silversmithing shop, would go on to symbolize the ideals of courage, resolve, and the relentless pursuit of liberty. His midnight ride, though often romanticized and simplified, represents more than just a historic event. It serves as a lasting symbol of the spirit that helped found the United States, the willingness to act, to stand firm in the face of tyranny, and to work toward a better future. In his lifetime, Revere was much more than the hero depicted in Longfellow's poem. He was an industrial pioneer, an artisan, a community leader, and an integral part of the revolutionary effort. His contributions to the American Revolution, though vital, extended beyond the dramatic moments we often remember. Revere's skills as a craftsman helped him not only to create silverworks admired for their beauty, but also to lay the groundwork for an emerging industrial nation through his copper mill and other business ventures. As time passed, the myth of Revere's midnight ride became central to his public image, but his real legacy is far more expansive. It includes the quiet work of organizing, leading, and providing for the nascent nation. In his later years, he transitioned into a respected businessman and civic leader, contributing to the infrastructure of his community. His industrial ventures, particularly his copper mill, helped fuel America's economic growth, and marked him as one of the first to embrace industrialization in the United States. Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, the myth of Paul Revere has been carried forward through monuments, statues, and public celebrations. His ride remains one of the most iconic symbols of the American Revolution. Yet, as history has evolved, so too has our understanding of Revere's contributions to the country's foundation. Modern interpretations of his life have focused not only on his famous ride, but also on his pivotal role in the economic and industrial growth of the United States. Today, Revere is remembered as a man whose dedication to his country, his craft, and his family shaped the future of America in profound ways. Revere's influence can be seen in the lessons he imparts to us today. His story reminds us that the ideals of freedom and liberty require not only bold action, but also persistence, teamwork, and resilience. The revolution, after all, was not won by one person, but by a collective effort of many who, like Revere, took action when called upon, no matter their role or station in life. In contemporary America, Revere's legacy serves as a symbol of American ingenuity, the pursuit of independence, and the ongoing fight for liberty and justice. His contributions to the American Revolution and the early years of the nation were foundational, and his life is a testament to the quiet yet vital ways in which individuals can shape history. As we reflect on the past, we are reminded of the importance of community, the value of hard work, and the continuous effort required to secure the ideals upon which the United States was founded. Today, as we honor Revere's memory, we are also prompted to consider how we too can contribute to the nation's future. Like Revere, we are called to serve our communities, work diligently for progress, and uphold the ideals of freedom and justice for all. His life encourages us to look beyond the myths of heroism and recognize the many ways in which we can each play a part in shaping the world around us. In an ever-changing world, Paul Revere's enduring legacy reminds us that even the smallest actions can lead to great change. In the end, Paul Revere's legacy is one of resilience, adaptability, and courage. He is a figure whose actions during the Revolution, along with his continued service to his community and his commitment to the nation's economic growth, continue to inspire and instruct us. His story is not just one of a single ride, but of a man whose contributions helped build a nation from the ground up. As America continues its journey, Revere's life serves as a powerful reminder that it is the quiet, persistent efforts of individuals working together for a common cause that create lasting change.